thing. One sec, chat room. One thing. Okay, we're good. In 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to The Starting Zone. This is The Starting Zone's live call-in show where we hear questions from you, our patrons. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is more focused on the people who play it, and it is July 29th, 2022. My name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host Jason Lucas. Jason, it's Friday night. It's the end of July. How you doing?
Here we are.
Yeah.
Episode number 6 for July. It's been a busy month of talking about WoW. Yeah. And they have not been short episodes either. They're not little, check-ins. I'm doing well. It's really, this is like the most exciting time. We sit here on the eve of season 4. I'm sure we're going to have a monster show for our regular format next week with season 4 kickoff and all the, blue posts and stuff and update notes that we got this week. It's just, I don't ever remember like a time of like late expansion WoW that was this exciting, where like alpha's like rolling over and very fast paced, and we're getting looks at different parts of that process, and feedback is, the feedback loop is actually like moving pretty fast, which is cool. You got Winds of Wisdom in the live game and everybody prepping for end of expansion and for season 4. You got Joyous Journeys in Classic, and everybody's, pounding characters to 70 for Wrath, which is coming out in less than 2 months. You got Nax is out in Season of Mastery as of today. What else could you possibly need? There's Wrath Beta is still up if you want to do that. There's literally like 5 different versions of World of Warcraft you can play right now, depending on what you have access to in your launcher. And, it's a lot. It's cool. I'm not complaining about it. It's, normally when we're this far into like, the end boss has been out for 5 months, almost 6 months, we're looking at each other going, okay, so hopefully like 3 more months of this, and hopefully not like 8 more months of this. And instead it's just, it's just full steam ahead. It's cool.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to dive into in World of Warcraft at the moment, but today's episode is about the patrons. We basically do these episodes once a month. They are for our patrons to be able to submit their questions to us or come on the show live and ask their questions to us, and we basically go over what questions they might have for us just in general about anything, and we also submit a question out to them. And so the question that we submitted this month out to them was the approach to professions in Dragonflight and what your plans are when it comes to it. So professions in Dragonflight are going to be a fairly central aspect of the game. I think so much so that I was talking about basically professions could be the reason why you play the game if you wanted to. It's pretty cool how in-depth all this stuff goes and how much you can specialize. And something they talked about a lot was having to sort of find those special crafters on your server and collaborate with them to be able to put stuff together. So I wanted to know what people's plans were, whether they were going to have multiple of the sort of like be their own crafting sort of camp where all of their alts came together and were able to craft things that were pretty incredible as one player, but with multiple characters, or whether they are going to be leaning on guildies or using work orders to be able to complete stuff. So we put that out there, and I guess we answer it first, and then we'll dive into what our patrons said. So Jason, what are your feelings on professions?
My main has been a blacksmith / miner from day one, basically, or probably not day one, but whatever day I first got to profession trainers back in 2004. I don't really see that changing. I think there's going to be, pretty significant benefits to a plate wearer to have like a high blacksmithing skill. The mining thing, like obviously there's going to be skill involved in mining and, what you're able to, like the quality of your yield and everything like that. There's going to be different quality reagents and what have you. I'm starting to think that for some of the alts that like I don't really care about professions for, maybe they just become kind of gatherers and funnel stuff to the crafters, and so maybe I could pick up, you know, engineering or jewel crafting or something on the main as well. But I don't think I'm going to go that route, simply because I don't like to. Once I have a character like leveled up or whatever, they kind of just sit there. I play the warrior all the time, so I will run out of mats if I'm not gathering on the warrior because I won't be playing other characters, you know. So I mean, I think I'm going to just invest in that. One thing I would sort of like it if the people that I play with routinely, my guild, would be cool with me sort of just being the guild blacksmith, and if people need stuff, they just funnel me mats and I make stuff and I skill up and whatever. We try to be smart in Shadowlands about the legendaries thing. We knew it was going to be a lot of mats and a lot of investment to get pieces level up. So we thought it would be smart to divide the labor, and everybody could pick like 1 or 2 pieces, you know, for each armor class that they were planning on making for legendary coverage. And so that way nobody was doubling up or whatever. And then, you know, 2/3 of those people disappeared after the first patch or so. And then we had to start all over and skill more people up. This is not going to be like that was, but it did kind of make me think, you know, maybe we shouldn't divide this labor like this. And maybe, you know I'm not really going anywhere, or even if I did, if I was in some kind of spot where, you know, I can't raid like regularly for the foreseeable, I'm pretty sure I would still log in and craft stuff for people at the very least, right? So, you know, maybe that's more of a direction we go in. But also, just for the way I like to play, eventually I do like to get all my alts, you know, leveled up and kind of have all or most of the professions available on my account. In fact, last week with the shaman, I've been on this leveling binge in Shadowlands with wins, and I got the last 4 classes I didn't have at 60 maxed out last week. On, I think, all 4 of those characters, I had them go double gathering, because especially in Shadowlands, it's so much XP to just run around and pick stuff up. Then you can sell it or craft with it or whatever. My shaman had traditionally been my scribe. Inscription is a very niche profession, but it does have some cool benefits. And I said, you know what? All the herbs she picked up, I'm gonna drop blacksmithing. I'm gonna convert her back to inscription, and I'm just gonna max out inscription. And with all the herbs I had lying around between all the gatherers I have, I shot her straight to max. And then there's actually an achievement for getting all Shadowlands professions to max, which I didn't know. So that was kind of a cool surprise when her inscription got maxed out. So, you know, that's more of like a long-term, like last patch, last, you know, year, last couple months of the expansion kind of thing for me, is to do that. But I do like to sort of get like an alchemist going kind of early in the process, so I can be a little self-sufficient with some consumables if possible. You know, people in most of the professions like that involve consumables or some kind of buff, enchants, jewel crafting, whatever. We have good coverage for that in guild, and people are pretty generous about it. But it's also, to me, you know, I play at weird times because I play a lot during the day when people are, you know, not home or whatever. So I like to be able to just flip to a different character and make myself something that I need, and just, you know, check it off the list, call it done. So I don't know. I don't think it's gonna change very much, but I guess I could see, with the way that they're pitching professions to us, it could be cool to maintain. Like, I have all the armor crafters at max skill in Shadowlands, for example. That doesn't provide a huge benefit to your gameplay, even on an alt, like a non-rating tune, or, you know, non-Mythic Plus tune, non-PvP tune, because you're pretty restricted in what you can craft right now. It's basically just about the legendary, right? But, I mean, with the way this profession revamp looks, and with being able to craft, you know, different slots that you can get to pretty high item level, and you can wear 5 of them at once, I mean, that might be an outlet for a thing that I do with my alt stable. Is like, okay, I'm going to funnel a bunch of mats to my leather worker, and I'm going to make, you know, some actually halfway decent gear for my leather armor class tanks. And that's a thing I can do with them that feels cool without, you know, having to like add additional raid time or something like that. Try to add like an alt knight or pug stuff when I can or whatever. Like, if it feels good to do and the benefits are there, like I could totally see myself doing that.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, it sounds like you want to sort of spread yourself out a lot more across the board and keep your options open with alts, which I think is great. It's certainly the way I lean as well. I didn't do that in BFA. In BFA, I went alchemy, leatherworking. I've been leatherworking on my druid ever since I created my druid, although skinning was the other. He was initially a Worgen, and so skinning, he actually got the additional skinning and could skin faster, which was kind of cool just by being
fast skinning, yeah.
Yeah. And so that was attractive at first, and pairing that with leatherworking worked really well. However, when you're raiding, you tend to gravitate more towards how can I pick a profession that's going to like directly benefit me on a regular basis in raiding, and being able to craft alchemist stones is a big thing for raiding, as well as, I mean, that extra flask just saves you a bunch of money, and being able to craft your own consumables also can end up saving you a bunch of gold as well, with being able to not rely on someone else to either be online to craft them for you, or buying already crafted potions tends to be much more expensive than just buying base materials. So especially with how the garden and whatnot worked inside Shadowlands, it made more sense to me to just take no gathering professions and go straight in on 2 actual crafting professions. That said, I love gathering professions. It always feels really rewarding when you're out in the world doing a loop, which is what I tend to do with a lot of my time when I play the game, when you can get added benefit to that, whether that's mining nodes or skinning mobs you've killed, or picking herbs, whatever it is, it feels like you're getting that added bonus reward for just being out doing your daily activities. So there's a lot of temptation to move around stuff on my main, to be able to have some gathering profession stuff going again, but I think I will resist. I'll probably maintain alchemy and leatherworking on my main, and just have other characters that I've leveled up that will sort of support that. I don't know how in depth it'll go. I think what I might end up doing is just getting a bunch of gathering professions on alts, so I can go out and gather, do double gathering on a couple of alts, and go out and gather everything I need, so that when I do want to craft things, not only do I have the income from selling the materials, but I'm more likely to be able to put together a work order where I can supply all the materials for the work order when I do want to craft something on my main. Because that's the other large factor, right? Is most of the time you're supplying materials on your main, so that you can actually have those work orders completed. Otherwise, you have to spend more gold or put more gold in to contribute to cover the cost of those materials. So I think that's what I'll end up doing. I think most likely I will end up maintaining my mains stuff, although I'm always tempted to go engineering because everyone always talks about how cool engineering is. So it's always a temptation in the back of my mind to get engineering on my character somehow, which would probably require dropping leatherworking is what I think I'd drop. I'd probably keep alchemy, because leatherworking doesn't tend to have something that's specific to it that is a benefit to you. There wasn't this expansion, at least. There wasn't something where I was like, hey, because I'm a leatherworker, here's a particular piece of gear that only leatherworkers can craft for themselves, that's maintained throughout each patch that you can essentially rely on. So I would have done better with something like engineering, where I could actually have, like the rocket boots or the second res. I have my normal res, and then, maybe inside Mythic Plus or whatever else it is, you also get that extra res from engineering, which is really nice. So it's just, I don't know, those sorts of things to me are attractive about professions when you actually have utility beyond just crafting something. So it'd be cool if they did bring that stuff back, if there was a way to like have a blacksmith be able to repair their own gear without having to like contribute gold to do it, or have a leatherworker be able to do a similar thing, be able to repair their own gear if you're wearing leather or mail, or have, the armor patches that you could apply to your gear, be something again where it's specific to them and it's an additional thing that only leatherworkers or only blacksmiths or whoever can actually apply. That stuff to me would be neat. So I like those aspects that really keep a profession attractive outside of just, hey, I can craft things occasionally when we need to craft things. And then in previous expansions, you really hit a point where you just stop being like, that stops being something that you need. You occasionally craft things for alts, but in general, the gear isn't good enough. So it'll be interesting to see how Dragonflight goes. But I think I'm just leveling 2 alts and throwing gathering professions on them, and then doing that. I really wish they did more with inscriptions. I think it's a cool profession, and I'd like to have a scribe that I felt was a really fun, viable profession to have, but it just seems to continuously be that one that's kind of left by the wayside.
Yeah, I mean, it was introduced to support glyphs, right? And glyphs are a lot different now than they were in 2010.
Yeah.
Was it Cataclysm when Inscription came in? Yeah, they are not the same thing. Or no, it was Wrath, right? When Inscription came in. So yeah, it's been a really long time, and the thing that Inscription was introduced to support no longer exists and hasn't for a really long time now. So, they got to find little things for them to do. But I do wonder about the Gathering thing, like how XP lucrative is Gathering going to be in Dragonflight? Because
that too, yeah.
In Shadowlands, like you pretty much don't have to do anything other than gather to level up if you really don't want to. There's so much stuff everywhere, and it yields so much XP that it's sort of like a viable, like low friction but slow way to level up your character. And if you don't care about your character's professions, then the correct thing to do is to have them double gather and stop every 5 feet and pick up everything you see, because it's going to get you like an extra level or two per zone, and you'll have stuff you can probably sell on the back end. So I'm curious to see, how big of a piece of the XP pie that Gathering is going to represent in Dragonflight. I hope they don't change it out of sheer convenience, but I don't think the way it is in Shadowlands is actually like good for the game. Like, I think you want to reward XP from, combat and completing quests and doing other activities that are a bit more, I don't know, dangerous or interactive than Gathering. I also wonder about, with reagent quality and everything like that, is it going to be hard to get like sufficient Gathering skill to get good mats on a tune that you're not playing as much as, your main, for example? So that's stuff we just don't really quite know what it's going to look like yet, but that's on my mind about these changes.
Yeah. I'm just glad that they've made the improvements they've made to Gathering over the years, where it's like shared nodes and that kind of stuff. Because I can't picture with adding the rarity to get what you gather, and then also having competition for nodes would just be like so toxic. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Like people rushing to try and get that, whatever it is, vein of ore, and who can mine it first and actually get, the ore out of it. And depending on like, what's this person's skill set at, what's your skill set at, you would technically get the better ore, you just quote unquote deserve it more than that person. Like that's all this stuff it'd be so bad. Yeah. So I'm
Let me tell you how it feels to be running around on a very populated and mature TBC Classic server on a non-max level character that cannot fly, hoping you can hit some mining nodes on the way.
Oh, man.
And you see one in the distance and you get close to it, and somebody just zooms in and takes it, and they're gone before you even get there.
Yeah. No. I don't miss those days, but I remember them well. All right, let's dive into what some of our patrons answered to this question and get to their questions as well. So this first comes in from Tetsemi, who says, answering the outgoing question, what is your approach to professions? I have alts, I have all the professions, and honestly, after Warlords, most of them have languished, although BFA did bring a few up to date for that expansion. Now in Shadowlands, I have my main, which does jewel crafting, mining, and least semi-relevant for the expansion. It is at least semi-relevant for the expansion. All right. I have my main, which does jewel crafting, mining, at least semi-relevant for the expansion. Okay, so, that's cool. I like that. I was the gem supplier for our raid team. They'd send me ore, I'd prospect it, cut gems, and drop them in the raid bank. And then things got complicated. And you were just spinning your wheels, making stuff to unlock higher levels, and not being able to sell the lower level stuff, as Jason has covered many times in the podcast. So, speaking specifically about legendaries and having to craft legendaries over and over to be able to upgrade to the next tier, and that whole shenanigans that existed inside Shadowlands. I do sympathize with your jewel crafting, mining and doing all the prospecting and dumping stuff in the guild bank. BFA was a weird expansion for doing that because the guild bank on our server was incredibly laggy for an incredibly long period of time. And so trying to put herbs or take herbs out or do whatever it is you need to do crafting wise was like a full day event of trying to put things in and take things out of the bank and deal with that. So I do sympathize being a guild supplier as far as what you were doing with that. All right. continues on and says, my hope for Dragonflight is that the specialist is actually achievable without all the waste of time and resources that you just vendor while leveling. I'm hoping work orders will actually allow some more active cooperation between professions, and that the items that are made at the top end actually stay relevant through the expansion. Okay, so a few things with that. The first is, I did find out that as you craft, so let's say I wanted to make higher level healing potions, right? I could craft healing potions until they went green, as far as the difficulty goes, if you know your profession difficulties go, where green is like you're the least likely to get a skill up from it, and then gray is you just stop getting skill ups from it. And then move on and craft, let's say, alchemy stones that were orange, right? And I'd watch my healing potions go from green to gray as I crafted my orange alchemy stones. However, if I went back to craft healing potions, by crafting the alchemy stones, I'm actually leveling up my healing potion pattern at the same time. So it does not have that irritating Shadowlands thing of, you have to craft 5,000 healing potions in order to be able to craft the max level healing potion, regardless of whether or not, you know, it's actually giving you skill ups for your profession, which I like. They don't have like a two-tiered system of, there's your overall profession skill, and then there's your ability to craft this particular thing better. It's just in general, as you craft more things for your profession, that the overall bar for the quality of stuff for all of the items you craft improves. So there is some hope when it comes to your hope to what you're hoping for when it comes to not having to waste a whole bunch of mats doing something. And the other thing you touched on there, which I think is great, is work orders, because work orders are going to be like the key way to, without having to spend a lot of your own materials a lot of the time, I'd say, be able to craft gear and get skill ups on your profession and craft things regularly on your profession. I think it would not be uncommon to see work orders for 80 or 100 or 300 DPS potions on some raid days where people are trying to craft a bunch of other for their guild or for characters or whatever it is. So I think there'll be a lot of those work orders sort of processing through, and the guild way of doing that I think will be really nice too, of just setting it for your guild. I know I will certainly pressure our officers to tell everyone to only use the guild feature, because I'm sure we have enough crafters in the guild to produce everything for people. And so that would certainly be a great way to help everyone improve their professions overall. So I hope that what you want is something that we get delivered, where professions not only stay relevant through the whole expansion, but that we're also in a situation where it feels rewarding to craft what we're crafting, and we're not just spinning our wheels.
Yeah, and I think that's it seems to me to be the big thing that you're trying to avoid. I mean, consumables are a bit different, right? Consumables should theoretically have a long-term market. If you have to craft a ton of consumables to skill up, fine, you're going to consume them. You can give them to friends to consume. You can sell them to customers who want to consume them. I think that the legendary crafting model in Shadowlands was just so bad that anything they can do to move away from that is welcome. You have to craft a ton of this low item level stuff that nobody's going to want, so that you can eventually craft the stuff that people actually want, except it's like prohibitively expensive to craft any of it at all. And then you just end up with a ton of items that nobody wants and you can't do anything with. So that doesn't really embody to me like the fantasy of being a cool, like expert armor smith making this powerful, coveted armor that people want to take into battle or something. Like, it's just, you're just filling a bar up. Well, I like filling up bars, right? But I feel like the whole structure of that system was really bad, and it seems like, I haven't played around with it yet, but it seems like what they're doing is pretty much a 180 from that. It's more, it is literally like quality over quantity, and it's about, anything that you do regarding your profession helps increase your skill, and then increased skill results in, better end products and everything like that. So it sounds good to me. I mean, there is some really weird stuff even with, what I would consider, well, I don't know if I'd call gems consumables necessarily, because you sort of consume them, but they're very long-term consumables, right? But like,
unless you're switching roles frequently or switching covenants frequently, I found,
yeah,
I carry around a stack of 20 haste and 20 mastery, Because as I bounce around rolls, I do regem my gear when I'm actually trying to do stuff. And this is, you know, Mythic Raider problem kind of thing, right? Like it is the higher end thing, but
and Druid problem
too. Yeah, I mean multi-class thing. Although I could see like if a mage was going between frost and fire, if crit was better for fire and haste was better for frost, I could see people doing some things like that. But yeah,
and you sort of have a ramp too when there's new content or whatever. As you're getting more gear or new gear, then you need gems more and everything like that. So
I think this expansion they shifted a little bit more into that consumable category. But I agree with you that like I definitely go through way more potions than I do gems.
They're like in between, right? It's not just like you have this forever, but you know, even with that, like jewel crafting, the requirements I feel like to make a legendary base piece are still ridiculous. I mean, you only need to make 3 of them to skill up, but you need so much ore from 2 different zones, right? You need two different zone specific ores, or you get the generic ore and just hope you get really lucky. Stuff like that, just you know, to have to go through that to make like 3 190 pieces, so you can learn how to make 3 210 pieces. You can see how this all started unraveling over time, right? And it seems like they're off to a better start here. So, like, you know, it is going to take. They've sort of made no bones about the fact that it's going to take investment of playtime and it is going to take effort. But hopefully, they've tweaked the system enough and added enough support to it that you're skilling up by making stuff that's valuable to someone, right? Whether it's you or your friends or, you know, the customer base in the crafting order system. You're not just making stuff to fill up a particular bar for a particular item and then hoping that once you get to the threshold you want to be at, that then you can do something with these items on the other end. Like, this is the inverse of that in hopefully a lot of ways that count. So, you know, I don't know if you'll have that feeling of like, oh, there's this one player on the server, you gotta whisper them because they'll make you a good item. Like, you know, maybe in certain instances, but the game just doesn't really work like that as much anymore. You know, I mean, I remember the days of even in like Wrath, it was like, oh, you know, reach out to the engineer in this guild because that guy can make guns, and you need a tanking gun. The crafted engineering tanking gun is BIS for Wrath, you know, tier 1. So make sure you hit them up. Like, I don't know. I mean, it could happen, but I don't think it'll be that big of a deal in most places. I think it'll still be like mostly anonymous. You're just operating like a UI frame to get what you want out of it. But the cool thing is, like, you'll get what you want, and the person with the profession will get the benefit of having like a direct market for their goods and an easy way to turn what they're doing into skill and coin. So, you know, I don't know, if you're not like a renowned blacksmith or whatever on your server, then I think the fact that you have access to make all the cool stuff and you get in-game currency is probably a pretty good consolation.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive into Tetsemi's question for us, which is, what's a reasonable amount of time outside of raid to be expected to be raid ready? If you're not raiding, how much time should you spend working on your professions and Mythic Plus or PvPing, etc.? So 2 sorts of questions there, but one really affecting the other as far as, like, you know, doing Mythic Plus can certainly contribute towards being quote unquote raid ready. Okay, so it's tricky to answer this because of the different difficulties that exist, obviously. I think for normal raiding, I mean, I think raid ready with a normal rating is for someone who's looking to do that as their objective. Like 2 or 3 days is like kind of the thing of like, so maybe 6 hours of playtime is what I would sort of lean towards, so that you're able to do a bunch of dungeons, maybe do a little bit of crafting, maybe look on the auction house a bit for some gear, or ask some friends to sort of help you out with some dungeon stuff to sort of get some gear to hop into doing normal raids. And often in that situation, when you're hopping in, there's a lot of learning that's taking place anyways, which means your gear isn't really going to compensate for just the learning that needs to happen when it comes to that content. When it comes to Mythic raiding, the people who want to dive into Mythic raiding tend to play the game a lot more on a regular basis. So like I'd for example, there's already people who are setting up pre-made groups for Tuesday because there's no Valor cap. and the item level is jumping up on all the Mythic Plus dungeon rewards, and there's no delay on getting max reward from end of dungeon for Mythic Plus next week. So my team's already like, who's online during the day on Tuesday? We're going to crush dungeons for 5 hours, right? Like that's what they want to do. And so there's already people lining stuff up for that. And so I think Mythic Raiders being quote unquote raid ready, there's an expectation you are raid ready for the first day of Mythic. So you literally have however much time there is from between when content, start when the patch content launches to when Mythic Raids come out to gear your character if you're playing on an ongoing basis. If you're just starting the game and you leveled up to max level, like for example, if I wanted to take my monk who I just finished and be like, they need to be raid ready for next week, I would probably need to play at least 20 hours to 24 hours of the game between now and the next raid day, because I would need to do all of the LFRs. I'd need to do world boss stuff. I'd need to grind a lot of Mythic Plus. I'd probably try and find a normal raid that I could hop in on and kill some bosses with. I do all of those things, and I think even when I arrived at raid on Tuesday, I'd still be quote unquote considered more of a carry than actually being geared enough. Because when it comes to Mythic raiding, the only way to be geared for Mythic raiding is to kill Mythic bosses and get the gear from Mythic raiding, or to obviously in Shadowlands situation do enough vaults to be able to get it, right? So to be actually geared enough to be considered a raider, I think would take weeks for Mythic raiding. Typically, which is why you normally see when new expansion content comes out, you see people who do Mythic play the game really intensely for those first 2 weeks before Mythic content launches to get as geared as they can possibly be, right? They run as much Mythic Plus as they can. They run, all the crafting and profession stuff they need to. They kill all the world bosses. They, in some cases, have multiple characters they're doing it on to try and get whichever character is the most geared is the one that they're going to bring to progression, like that kind of idea. There's a lot of that going on. So it's a pretty extended amount of time that you can end up committing to the game. But I think on a regular basis for most people, it's probably six or 7 hours of time before you hop into a normal raid that you want to spend at max level, just getting stuff, whether that's running dungeons or, gearing up to do some LFR and doing some LFR or doing some crafting that you want to do, like that kind of idea. And on a regular basis, if you're not raiding, how much time should you spend working on professions and Mythic Plus and PvP? It's really as much time as you want to. Like if you're not raiding, you can spend as much time doing those things as you want. And I think that really comes down to how much someone wants to play the game. I know people who play the game for only a few hours a month. I know people who play the game a few hours a day, and they consider that casual. And so it's a really big variety of people, right? I think the people I know who PvP don't really consider gear to be a limiting factor. They look at PvP more as a skill-based activity. And so if someone happens to have, 10 or 15 eye levels on them, is that an advantage? Yes. But is that something that's going to determine whether or not they can win their arena match? No. For them, it's very much getting the right combos of abilities and knowing counters and knowing talent, counters and et cetera, to be able to outwit your opponent inside the PvP arena situation. So that's certainly a large factor. When it comes to Mythic Plus, gear is quite important to push very high keys, but I would say gear is pretty minor up until you start hitting those above 10s and above 15s, and then gear starts to play a much more important factor in things. So depending on what you're trying to do. But yeah, if you're not raiding, I think most people would probably spend, whatever they're comfortable spending in their week, probably just a couple hours a week playing for professions and Mythic Plus and PvP if that's what they're looking to do.
Yeah, it really depends on what your goals are, right? And it also, this fluctuates wildly over the course of a patch or a season of content here. I think if you're an LFR player, maybe a couple hours at the outset of content release to do campaign questing and stuff, and there's probably very little upkeep or whatever you need to do on your character to just queue up and do your LFR weekly. Normal, maybe, I don't know, an hour or two a week. Make sure you're doing your weekly stuff, whatever gives you some nice rewards and, you're ready to go. Heroic, maybe more like an hour a day, give or take. Make sure that you're
Doing your loop. Yeah.
Doing whatever you can do to get a little edge, make some gradual progress on something. Sometimes even at Heroic, it might just be important to have resources, right? Have gold, have consumables, have mats, stuff to help the team out. So that stuff can pay off a lot, We have a few people in our guild who are just like monsters when it comes to like fishing, or herbing. And so somebody's always got a cauldron, somebody's always got a kettle, and that's a huge benefit to the whole team. So that, that goes a long way. I think for mythic rating, I think that really depends on the expectations of the team. And, the sort of the simple answer is like as much as you possibly can in terms of how much time should you be spending, which is not necessarily reasonable, but that, that depends on what the team's goals are and paces and everything like that. I mean, in a perfect world, like how should it be? I've kind of always been comfortable with about that, hour or so of upkeep on my tune for raiding, or maybe like an hour per raid night, right? Like I remember it kind of, in the very olden days of the game, you had to do a lot of upkeep for your character to be raid ready and everything like that. In like Wrath, I feel like I was doing about that. I'd go farm some wolf meat or whatever it was I needed for my food and everything, like, whatever consumables I needed. And as long as I had that stuff in stock, I felt pretty good about it. We didn't have any, I'd be doing my daily badges or whatever, but there wasn't other stuff outside of that. I think when you're at that heroic and above level, hitting your weekly caps is really important. Probably, cap out on valor. Make sure that you're ticking off all those boxes, because it's either going to benefit you directly or it's going to benefit your team or something. But I think it's okay. I mean, there have been periods of time when I was raid logging pretty heavily, even recently, and it doesn't feel great. I'd prefer to like have some touchstone to the game and like something I want to come do on a regular basis, even if it's not raid time or dungeon time. I know a lot of players don't feel that way, but I think they've done a good job of over the years of like minimizing that and making raid logging less punishing. You still can't do it without any concessions, but it used to be like if you're not putting the time in, then you really are a liability in raid because you literally just don't have what you need to participate. On the other side, I don't feel like you should need to do 2 to 4 hours of Torghast a week in order to be able to raid. I think there's a difference between doing stuff that feels like intrinsically kind of role playing, right? Like preparing consumables, going out and acquiring the materials to cook or to, alchemize into something or whatever. Like, I feel like that's fair play. Whereas engaging in this, unrelated system that doesn't really have a direct tie to this other piece of content, that always just felt weird to me. So I don't know. That's kind of where I land on that as far as the way I think it should be. I think it mostly has been that way over the years. It's just, there's a decent chunk of people who just want to raid log, and I'm not saying that they're wrong, but also the game has never really been designed that way, and it's also not really what I want to do. But I think it's probably been less punishing to be a raid logger lately than it ever was before.
Yeah, without having any kind of grind outside of raiding that directly benefited your character by logging on a regular basis, it's been much more forgiving. The thing that I will say about the people on my raid team who raid log is they're often broke when it comes to gold, and they're often in a situation where they are asking other people for things if they can get them off them, or having to talk about spending real money on buying a token to sell the token to get gold to then be able to buy the consumables they need to raid. And I've often talked about things like, hey, if you just maintain this 10 or 15 minute routine, you can sustain enough gold to sort of, not have to worry about this kind of stuff. But I definitely know that when we get around to things like selling mounts for gold, when it comes to final bosses, they all get very excited because they are so broke that they are desperate for getting that chunk of gold. And so we've started selling, we sold two two jailer mounts so far for gold. And I think the cuts for those per player was somewhere between 250 and 280K. So, you know, we've gotten 500K back into the pool of people's resources going into this season. Hopefully people are not complaining as much about trying to get gold or being broke. So,
yeah, that's always kind of the problem. Like even if there's no character power, there's always some benefit to spending time in the game, right?
Oh, always.
Like there just is. And if you don't spend that time, then you don't get that benefit, which might be okay, but man, the game really does like just throw gold at you. So if you're walking around broke, you might want to just do some callings and stuff. I know it's not like the most engaging stuff to do, but you know, you can easily make a couple thousand gold a day just for logging in and doing some quick laps and killing some stuff. And I don't know. I like doing stuff like that, but I understand that
it's not everyone's cup of tea.
There's some people who just will not do that if the game is not forcing them to, essentially.
Yeah. Okay, the next patron who answered our question was Cheeseball, who says, I'm slowly building alts to be self-sufficient with professions, but I would never even consider dropping engineering on my main. I find it fun, and the B-Res is too valuable in Mythic Plus. Well, good for you building up your stable of alts. It's kind of what I'm working on at the moment too, is I don't have a lot of characters on Sargeras, so I'm working on getting enough characters up on there that when Dragonflight launches, I can at least have 2 or 3 characters that I can level up with professions for gathering. All right, Cheeseball's question for us is, which pre-Legion dungeon would you most like to see as a Mythic Plus dungeon? And which older dungeon would you like to see a new wing added to, similar to the upcoming Uldaman dungeon? I would like to see either Zul'Gurub or Zul'Aman in Mythic Plus. I could see some fun pathing options with them. For a new wing to an old dungeon, I'd love for it to be either Azul Narub or Ankaret. Okay, interesting choices. I mean, Zul'Aman's just, yeah, I mean, that's just a great Mythic Plus choice. I'm down with you on that one. That's very cool. Another dungeon I wouldn't mind seeing in Mythic Plus would be Old School Steam Vaults. I really like that dungeon. You can have some very speedy ways to get through it, and there's some different ways to do pulls, and you know, a couple of like semi-different routes, but in general, it's just a fun. I just really enjoy it. It's very nostalgic for me, so I love that dungeon. And one that I wouldn't mind seeing a new wing to, that would also be kind of cool if they did choose to do Mythic Plus or something like that with, is Culling of Strathhome. Culling of Strathhome for me was a cool dungeon with multiple paths, with time-based events that was designed that way to begin with. I could see, and not only if they did a new wing, they could add a little extra story. They could make up another character that they, you know, was involved in that, but was like it affected them. Maybe it's villagers or whatever it is. Tell a little story with another wing that I think would be kind of cool to see. So I'd be down with an extra wing of Culling a Strath with a little bit more explanation behind it. Jason, how about you?
Well, man, I love ZA, but it would be a weird Keystone dungeon. I guess bring it on, you know, why not? We can get weird. I think my answer for that, this is a cop out, but really, like, this is really what springs to mind, because I've said this before, and we should have voted for this in the poll.
Oh yeah, well,
Bloodmaw Slag Mines. Bloodmaw Slag Mines should be a Keystone dungeon. It sort of has some of the hallmarks of modern dungeon design. I mean, if you think about it, Bloodmaw Slag Mines is pretty old now. It came out in 2014, which Warlords doesn't seem like it's that old, but it's very old now. And yeah, like it had, you know, you could kind of take a couple different paths through the dungeon, and there were some different events that happened inside of it that you had to account for. You know, you had some choices that you could make there. And I mean, I would want to obviously see an approach where they move some trash around and stuff so that you can, you know, just open up the decision space a bit more. But I think that was, you know, that was where we started to see some stuff that was, it was like open-ended to a degree, but directed enough. Whereas in very old school dungeon design, it was either like a straight shot, like kill everything from point A to B, then from B to C, then from C to D, then you win. Or it was just a giant sandbox full of mobs and bosses, and you had to figure out what to do in there. Right? like Blood Maul Slag Mine sort of combined the two philosophies into a more coherent thing. And I think that's the kind of thing that makes Mythic Plus work so well as a system is you have these dungeons that have a lot of texture, right? They're not straight shots for the most part. It's not a like just a hallway that you're going down to the boss and then the next hallway that you go down to the boss. And old dungeons used to be like that. But also, you have things like, I don't know, think of the first kind of area of Necrotic Wake, right? You have a lot of decisions there about what you want to fight and how much you need to fight and how you're going to get around it. Like, that kind of stuff is, I almost think of like Dire Maul or something, right? And like the difference between where we came from many years ago and what they do now. And I think Slag Mines would be cool in that regard. As far as like adding a wing to an old dungeon, I mean, the example is very thematic, right? These kind of Nerubian dungeons, they all sort of fit the same thing. Does it have to be like a dungeon that already had more than one wing, or like dungeons that already had some thematic connection? Because if so, I think that makes it like. I mean, this is a hard question, really, because I sort of like to, I like them to surprise me and to do different stuff. I don't really like revisiting something. I will say this. I think one of the coolest dungeons thematically that I've liked in recent years, and it's starting to become less recent all the time, but is Vault of the Wardens, right? Which was like the prison you descend into that, the Wardens had sort of kept all these prisoners over the years, these weird demons and stuff. And I would like to see maybe if we were going to do something, where we're adding on to an existing dungeon concept or expanding on the theme of a dungeon, I'd like to see that theme kind of expanded upon. Maybe some other kind of way to express that, or, if Vault of the Wardens, you're going, down, maybe you're going up in some way, or ascending something, or you're like weaving your way through maybe a part that was sealed off or whatever, like just kind of a different vibe than sort of
high security wing, or
like go down the elevator and then kill all the stuff on this block and then move through. Like, I think you could do something like that and just, maybe mix it up thematically. Maybe you have like just different types of, maybe it's not just demons they have down there, right? Or something like that. Or maybe it's like weirder, different types of demons. Like I just, that dungeon was so cool. I think it still looks really cool too. I went out there for Legion Time Walking back whenever that was. I don't know. When was the first time that was around, in December or something? And I was like, man, the props in here are still so cool. Like everything just looks great about this place. So, I mean, obviously Legion holds a special place in my heart, and, the whole Night Elf story and that whole culture is also kind of that's my home base in WoW. So anything that kind of explores those elements, I always like. I mean, I guess it would be that, or maybe Blackrook Hold, which is kind of in the same vein, right? It's another very Night Elf centric dungeon from Legion. Those would be the things that immediately spring to mind. Like, hey, let's revisit that. This is a really cool concept that we could probably get some more cool dungeons out of.
Yeah, I can certainly see the Vault of the Wardens being a cool one to add a wing to, for sure. I like that concept of just adding on another really neat area to the prison, and you can really tell a cool story with that. Okay. Next response comes in from Shorl, and they say, in most expansions, I try to have one character with each profession, and generally, any leftovers in my stable vaults get some combination of mining, herbing, and skinning. I'm not sure yet what my plan is for Dragonflight, other than my Paladin main will remain a blacksmith/miner, and my primary alt hunter will remain a leatherworker skinner. I don't generally look into secondary systems until I'm done leveling. While I level, my gatherers dump everything into the auction house to try and grab some gold from the folks who want to level their crafting professions right away. That mode did bite me in the butt in Shadowlands, ultimately, because I came to the Legendary game too late to actually take advantage of it and make it valuable to level. Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, right? If you don't level whatever the Legendary thing is, the moment it comes out in the first 3 days, you basically are not profitable off of doing it because you had to craft so many of them. So, yeah. Question for
It
us.
is pretty
Go ahead.
smart though. Like and I always tell myself I'm going to do this, and I never do. But what Shore was saying about grab everything and sell it all, because the prices are only going to go down, right?
Yep.
Generally,
Yep.
I mean, sometimes it might spike, but more than likely they're going to be worth the most the earliest, and then the prices are going to descend. But I get precious about stuff, you know. I collect it, then I sit on it forever, and then I use some of it, and then I end up selling it for pennies on the dollar at the very end of the expansion. This is just what I do. But I always tell myself, like, I should just sell all this stuff now and get the gold, and I'll just buy back what I actually need later.
Yeah, I run
And
into
that will maximize my profit, but I never do that.
Yeah, I run into a similar issue with leveling an alt at the very beginning of an expansion. I sort of level my main and then go, well, I could level a second character and have that other character be viable, like right now, as far as gathering and doing all those sorts of things to sort of help myself out. But any time that I'm not spending on my main feels like time that I should be spending on my main. And so it's
Right.
that similar thing of like, while I'm gathering stuff, I could be selling all of this on the auction house to make a bunch of gold. But what if I need this for my main in like 3 days, right?
Because
So-
I'm not sitting on millions of gold that
Right.
I could buy stuff
Exactly.
later if
Yeah.
when I actually needed to use. Yeah, it's a weird game that I play with myself, but I mean, in some ways, it's sort of just. I think it's because really I'm sort of an RPer at heart in a lot of ways, you know. And it's like, oh, like my tune like collected this. This is theirs, and they're going to use it to make their thing. Like it's not beneficial from a gameplay standpoint, but I've gotten a little bit better about it. I will say, at least, like the auction house mount helps immensely in just going, you know what, this is getting auctioned, and I'll see what happens, and if it sells, cool, and if not, then I'll hang on to it and I'll use it for something else. But I'm going to try to make money off of it first.
Right. Yeah.
I guess a good thing about well, one of many good things about what we're hearing about Dragonflight is, you know, there's going to be an auction house accessible to everyone in the new capital city.
Yeah.
So that will make it a bit easier while you're in your bank fiddling around with your inventory to go, you know what, I'm just going to go list all this stuff, even if you don't have the Brutosaur, which was never. It's never really been an option except for, you know, in some expansions with engineers. You know, there have been some engineering accessible auction houses in capital cities that aren't in Stormwind and, you know, the Orgrimmar and the main cities. But this is, you know, as far as I can remember, this is the first time they've added an auction house to a new capital city that's just there and you just go do it. So that should, you know, if this stuff is on your mind with Dragonflight looming, keep that in mind. Maybe you will want to use the auction house more than you have in the past, and it'll be much more accessible and easier to do. You don't have to go to Stormwind to do it. So that's a huge plus. I sort of understand why in the old days they didn't just put new auction houses in everywhere, because they sort of wanted this connection back to, you know, your faction or your race's like main hub. But you also like had to go see your class trainer, you know, stuff like that. And you'd go you'd have a couple things to do while you were back in the city, and then you'd go back out into the expansion content, and you know, it just doesn't work that way anymore. And for me, for years, that meant, well, I just don't really use the auction house, which ends up costing you a ton of potential gold.
For me, it meant that I would do incredibly large batches at the auction house. Like it would not be uncommon for me to put everything up, log out, come back in 2 days later and open my mailbox, and there's more pages than the mailbox can track, and you have to like take things out of your mailbox to be able to see the stuff that's hidden behind the other stuff in the mailbox. Whereas now I hop on my Brutosaur and throw up 5 things and then, you know, go about my merry way. When it comes to that kind of stuff, I'm much less likely to put up 20 or 30 stacks of things, whatever it is, on the auction house at the same time, because I just sort of throw it up as I go. And if that's more what it feels like in Dragonflight for people, where they're able to go back to the main city, where they're kind of logging out every day and just dump the 7 or 8 stacks of things they have on the auction house, as opposed to sort of stockpiling inside of your bank because that's what you have access to all the time, and then going to Stormwind or whatever and doing these trips back and forth between your bank and the auction house to just dump everything that you've built up. I think that'll be really nice. The other thing that factors into that is the reagent bag that we're all going to have, bag slot we're all going to have inside Dragonflight, where all the reagents are just dumping into that, you know, one bag. That'll be easier to sort of empty your reagent bag every day for some people to do that on the auction house all at the same time, which will be nice. Okay.
Yeah, it's obvious they're looking at a real holistic picture here of how the professions work in the larger gameplay loop of World of Warcraft, and that's why we're seeing so much of the support come in. And I hope it feels good. I hope people like it. It seems like it's stuff that I never really thought about, I guess, just because it's sort of always been the way that it is to a large degree, right? So you don't ever really feel like, oh, well, they're just going to completely overhaul this at some point, but it's coming, and I think it's going to be really beneficial to players, and it's smart because if it works, it's just like, okay, this is a blueprint for the next many years. This is stuff that's tied right to your character. This is tied right to gameplay. So there's, you don't have to retool it every 2 years and have everybody start back from zero. It's just not. It's not the way that needs to be. So, hoping for the best. I mean, I like everything we've seen and heard about the direction of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Charles' question for us. How much more content do you think will be available in Dragonflight for cross-faction play? Do you think they'll implement some way of being able to do group finder activities in cross-faction or outside world stuff? Yes. I think that they will most certainly have group finder-based cross-faction inside Dragonflight. Probably not immediately, but most likely in that .2 patch is where we'll see a lot of the other cross-faction stuff drop, is my expectation. We'll see cross-faction guilds, I think, come in the .2 patch. I think a lot of that is there's technology barriers, and since they sort of made the decision partway through Shadowlands to do cross-faction to begin with, a lot of what they designed initially for Dragonflight wasn't with that particularly in mind, which is why we're kind of getting this like mishmash together thing at the moment. They know it's a problem that allowing people to do cross-faction raiding and cross-faction Mythic Plus is going to solve a lot of issues with being able to put together teams and have teams actually accomplish their goals and do recruiting between the factions and have fun playing the game. So they want to get in there as soon as possible, but it does feel like a rush job. There's a lot to cross-faction right now that is, people kind of leaves a lot to be desired. And I think that we'll see that in the second chunk of the second large chunk of content that we get for Dragonflight in that .2 patch. We'll see the I think cross-faction guilds, cross-faction group finder stuff. We'll see. I don't know. Outdoor World might be a little weird. I don't know what they might hold to their guns of like in the outside world. It's less likely that this works as far as lore-based stuff goes for them. But it'd be nice if it worked that way. I certainly wouldn't mind. It would be a lot easier to kill world bosses, do group objectives, etc. if you didn't have people of the opposite faction tagging things that weren't group tag. I know that when I'm leveling up right now on my characters and I'm killing quest mobs and there's someone of the opposite faction killing quest mobs next to me, those mobs still go gray and I can't basically tag that same mob. And that's a little bit frustrating, whereas if you just could group up with all those people and it was all shared tag, that'd be kind of nice. So things like that, I think they will work on, but if your question in general is if during the Dragonflight expansion, do we think we'll see more stuff added to cross-faction play? My answer is yes. I think we will most certainly see more things added in cross-faction play.
Yeah, I hope that we get guild support for cross-faction tunes within Dragonflight's lifespan, but I wouldn't be surprised if the tech hurdle is so massive that it may not be advisable to ever actually do. I hope so, because I feel like, and just in my own experience, what I have seen so far from cross-faction instances but no guild support is, okay, well, somebody who plays Horde, they're looking for a new spot to raid or whatever. Okay, so they trial with us, and if it's a good fit, then, I invite them through the communities thing and Real ID for a couple weeks, and then eventually they get fed up with not being in the guild, so then they faction transfer. Like, that's happened a couple times so far. The guild is the social unit of the game, right? So, like, yes, you could play whatever tune you want, but then you can go do a raid together, but that's not the entire experience, and it doesn't work in the whole ecosystem of like, commerce, right? The way the economy works, and with add-ons and stuff that we have for invites and overall group management. That stuff gets weird. and some of it just doesn't work. So I don't know. That's my, if we could get one thing, that's the thing that I would want, but I don't know. I don't know how realistic it is. I mean, it might break the entire game if they did that. And I mean, just, I don't want them to break the entire game. So
Yeah.
that would be my big wish. I do think like match made stuff for cross faction, at least for dungeons and LFR. I mean, I think they should enable that if it's possible to do from a tech standpoint. I understand that they want it to only be opt-in, right? That they don't want you to have to play and cooperate with players of the opposite faction unless you explicitly say that you want to, which sort of makes sense, but I'm not sure if there's like a huge, slice of the base out there that really cares about that. Maybe there is, and I don't know, but I can't imagine. I haven't encountered anybody who has said to me, man, I hope they never turn on cross-faction instances for LFR and Dungeon Finder, man, because that's just going to ruin my whole experience. I don't want to play with those dirty players of that other faction. Like, I've only heard the complete opposite, which is like, man, I wish they would just turn this on so that queues would go down, or that I could, play my different tunes with my other friends and we all play different factions and we just want to queue for stuff together. So I don't know. I mean, I think you could probably combine the philosophy of opt-in only with match-made stuff. If maybe there's like a checkbox or like a toggle that you could say, yes, find me cross-faction, players or whatever. I don't know. I feel like you could do it in a way that upholds the philosophy that they want. And it would be, I guess then you could say, well, then you're really not leaving it up to the players who don't want cross faction, because their queues are going to be so much longer that, they're going to feel social pressure to allow the cross faction. And then that's not really the intent of the system, which is true. But again, I don't know how many people this actually represents, right, in reality. Honestly, this is probably a minority opinion, but I hope they don't ever turn on cross-faction Outdoor World. Even in like non-war mode, non-world PvP situations, I do think the friction of having, faction competition is fun, and it adds texture to the Outdoor World that otherwise wouldn't be there. I think they've already removed way too much texture from the Outdoor World. And I kind of like it if I'm questing near like an opposite faction player and trying to like tag more stuff than them and like keep them from getting tags that they want or whatever, and trying to get my stuff done before they do, or help out players of my faction that are also in the area and kind of crowd the other faction out from getting their stuff done. And obviously war mode's a whole different story, but I think there's something interesting about that like keeps you like awake in the Outdoor World, right? You're not just like kind of mindlessly clicking on stuff until all the bars fill up. So I hope they don't do that. And also if they ever go back to, having sort of alliance turf and horde turf in the Outdoor World somewhere, which I'm not saying I want to see like faction war as part of like a main theme, but obviously this is all dragon turf in Dragonflight. But if we get an expansion someday where you have like alliance and horde turf, I want it to kind of feel like that, and I don't know. Lately I've really been a proponent for more texture in the game, and I feel like a lot of stuff has stripped that texture over the years. And yeah, I think cross faction Outdoor World would be a little too far for me.
Okay, I get that. One of the things I wanted to mention here while we're talking cross faction, Greenwall was an add-on that a lot of people used for if you had multiple guilds. We used it in CTR. The Zeros to Heroes, DJs, Little Heroes sort of community, they use it a lot for all their teams. They're actually switching over to a new add-on called X Faction, which I assume stands for cross faction if you did the X. And it's supposed to integrate in communities into your guild chat. And that way, basically all of your guild chat for both guilds cross faction, because it all happens through community, happens as like green text normally for you. So it'll not only integrate multiple teams, because all those teams will join the same community, multiple guilds, should I say, because they'll all join the same community, but cross-faction to that community and make it all green text, so it seems like you're inside one guild, if you will, in that situation. So if you're someone who shares an issue like that, or maybe you're someone who's part of that community, be ready to grab an add-on and switch it up so you can actually talk with all your Horde side friends that also are part of the community.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's just, it shouldn't be up to the add-on scene to
Agreed.
provide this kind of support, you know? Yeah. And like, I in a way, I get that like they wanted to do this for a variety of reasons, right? The cross-faction functionality, and that it was a big hurdle to get over, and that they needed to do it little by little for stability reasons. I understand all of these things. I also, I said it when it was first announced, like, if this leans on communities, then communities either needs like a huge overhaul and upgrade, or it's not going to be a great experience. And like, once you have the invite in place and you're off and running, it's fine. But all the peripheral stuff is not great, and communities, in my opinion, remains not great. And, you know, when we saw communities at, what was it, BlizzCon 17 or something, like when BFA was sort of being announced and on the way, it's like, this is not a replacement for the guild functionality. It doesn't work the same way. It's not as good as it's not as robust as the guild system is. And
it was one of the first times they introduced a feature for the game for me that felt like an inferior version of something that already existed in the game. It was one of the first times they did that, where it was like, here's this new thing we've been working on. And you're like, great, but it's worse than what we have. Why would we want to use this thing that's worse than what we have? That was very strange.
Like, it does different stuff, obviously, the guilds can't do, but like, that's not kind of the point, I guess, right? Like, what we need to do is continue to elevate the guild system and the guild structure, and guilds is a central part of playing World of Warcraft, in my opinion. And I've been saying that the whole time we've been doing this show. And I feel like, if anything, it's only gotten worse. I mean, guilds should be your kind of lifeline to the game, to, you know, like-minded people that you like to hang out with and play with and have sort of a social relationship with and an in-game relationship with. Like, you know, the way it was even from day one out of the gate was fine. It was good enough. You know, it tied you all together in a way that was palpable and built into the game, just like right out of the box. And I don't know, man, they got to just, I think they got to bring that stuff into the future in a real palpable way, not just tack on these, you know, BattleNet integration features that don't function the way that we need them to. There's too much separation between the game and the guild panel and whatever's going on BattleNet.
Yeah, guild perks are a thing that exist so passively you don't even notice when you have them or not. It's very strange. All right. Next question comes in from Zahar, who says, to answer your question, I doubt my approach will change much. I've never been a alt-heavy player, and since Legion, I've only had 2 max-level tunes. My main with engineering for all the toys and teleports, and my single alt with Herbalism Alchemist to provide flasks and pots of raids. But I recently got a 3rd tune to max level, and working on a 4th, so maybe I might have a specialized leatherworker to funnel gear to my rogue main. My question for you is, do you feel Blizzard is lining up enough endgame content for Dragonflight? Beyond just raids and Mythic Plus, we hear a lot about talents, professions, and the leveling experience, and how they are expanding on the Zereth Mortis feel, which is great to some extent. Zereth Mortis was well put together, but to be honest, if it wasn't for the rep grind and for the Eternal Augment rune, I probably wouldn't have put nearly as much effort into that zone. I found gear rewards greatly fell behind what I was getting in Raid and Mythic Plus, and the only thing that kept me going past Exalted was the free honor for a new deal weekly, which thanks, by the way. But even that isn't enough to drive me to get into that zone anymore. Yeah, it's... First of all, you're welcome. I'm glad that a new deal was something that you checked out and it was cool, and we talk about it a lot on the show, so it's nice to know it's impacting. And yeah, I certainly agree that Zereth Mortis was fun for a certain period of time and then just kind of got very old kind of quick. It is nice that you can do a loop and finish all of your Zereth Mortis stuff fairly quickly. It's not like there's an hour and a half of a loop to do. It is a fairly quick loop for Zereth Mortis, so I do appreciate that. It doesn't especially feel like you're doing the rare camping that we were doing in the Maw, which really was painful and was a huge time commitment if something you want to do. There's no min-maxing with like the eyeball watching you. So that aspect of Zereth Mortis I like a lot. But do I feel like Blizz is lining up enough endgame content for Dragonflight right now? No, I don't. Jason and I are both proponents of liking to have a daily reason to log in and do things in the game. And when we asked that question while we were interviewing a dev, it was not something that they could directly answer. They basically talked about Mythic Plus and PvP and Raid, and didn't talk too much about whether or not there's going to be some sort of reward for logging in regularly, playing the game regularly, that is a way to empower your character and get them all leveled up. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't currently one that's going to be in the game. It's just one that hasn't really hit alpha testing. They haven't done any real super end game alpha testing yet for Dragonflight, which means that there are systems that we haven't seen yet, and so there absolutely could be something that they have planned or lined up for it. They just also haven't communicated it to us. I do feel like they've moved professions into an end game content field for Dragonflight, and I think that's certainly interesting. Professions didn't used to be that, so I am glad that they've sort of fallen that into the category. I feel like I would put that alongside something like Mythic Plus, in the sense that you could sink a substantial amount of time on a regular basis into doing work orders, farming up materials, crafting higher level things, contributing towards crafting very high level things with your character as far as professions go. And so I feel like they're taking a little bit more of a forefront alongside Raid's Mythic Plus PvP. But I want something that's a system in the game that I go out into the world, and no matter what activity I'm doing, whether it is something like Raid's Mythic Plus PvP, or it's doing my callings inside this case, or emissaries, depending on whatever you want to call them, or I'm just doing world quests or daily quests, whatever they end up being, or invasions, if there's some sort of invasion that's taking place, which we also didn't really get too much of. We got some invasions in the Maw, but that was about it. In this expansion, but those events were pretty cool when they were taking place, because it did give you a reason to log in every 4 hours and see which one was up and take advantage of it. Those activities should all give a currency that in some way empowers my character, and I don't care if that empowerment is just outdoor world. It should be something that empowers my character. It could be I increase my flight speed, or dragon riding is the system that literally will end up with a pool that you can just keep dumping resource into to make your dragon riding better and better and better, to the point where like you can fly at ridiculous speeds for huge amounts of time, and you can press your buttons 9 or 10 times and, you know, fly from one end of the continent to the other, you know, at lightning speed. That to me would be something that I would put effort into, that I would feel like not only am I getting this resource that I want, I'm also getting this thing powered up that I enjoy doing, or that makes me feel stronger as a character, that, you know, I like that feeling. I don't like feeling like I'm going out to do a world quest to get a piece of gear that is lower item level than I'm wearing to vendor because I just need the reputation. Give me something else I'm getting from that world quest that also feels good for my character than just reputation. Because at a certain point, you just hit, this is for these little tiny Paragon bags that you've gotten most of the rewards from, so what's the point in doing it? And then you just stop doing the outdoor content, and you end up in a situation where you're raid logging, or you're only logging in to do very few things. And that's not what I like about WoW. I want there to be a motivation to get in there regularly and do the outdoor world content, because the outdoor world is amazing in this game. It's phenomenal. Like, I go back and level up characters now, and I just take them to BFA every time, because I'm like, I just love this. I loved this outdoor world. This is a phenomenal outdoor world to go through. And, you know, that's, you know, very limited of me, because Warlords is a great one too for outdoor world, and Cataclysm was cool with the redesign of those zones that they did. And like, there's so many other spaces you can go and explore, that I find it unfortunate when, like, my main motivator when playing the game is to log in and go into a dungeon and do a dungeon and never really leave the major city, and not really go out in the rest of the zones that exist and enjoy those zones. So I like when there is the opportunity to do it. Pandaria is another amazing open world place that I loved. Yeah,
I think there's enough. I think there's enough for what the player base has vocally told them that we want. Is my opinion. I think if you didn't like Zareth Mortis, then you probably better buckle up for 10.0. Like, they pretty much told us a long time ago that Zareth Mortis was sort of the blueprint for, Dragonflight Outdoor, 10.0 Outdoor. And I think Zareth Mortis is a really cool zone with a lot of cool benefits that you can get, and it's very replayable. And I played it a lot for the first, 3 months, maybe longer than that. And I don't know. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything because I'm not putting time into my main in Outdoor WoW on a regular basis at this point. Legion artifact power was kind of maligned. There were some problems with it, but it was relatively fair, and everybody had access to the same stuff, and it got faster over time, and you could buy all of your stuff eventually, and then you had it all, and then you didn't care anymore, or you did care and you kept working on it. BFA was a mess because you threw in the confounding factor of the random gear drops that had different traits on them, and you needed a certain layout of traits in order to feel like your character was doing what you wanted it to do. And in 8.0, like, there weren't even a lot of traits out there. They didn't have the second ring on them yet. And then you had to have a certain amount of AP to unlock the different tiers of the traits. And, people just burned out on that so hard. And then, Anima in Shadowlands, like, to me, was essentially a non-factor because it's just this currency that you're collecting for nothing. I mean, the cosmetics, but I don't like any of these cosmetics, and I doubt I'll use any of them very much over the next many years of World of Warcraft. But for a lot of players, they were hard gates into features because you needed to unlock all this stuff, and it's like I was used to just pulling as much currency as I could out of whatever I was doing, so I unlocked everything right away. But people don't want to do that. Like, your average player has no interest in this stuff. They just want access to the parts of the game that are fun. And they don't think that doing repetitive solo content is the thing that is bringing them back over and over again. So, I think they had to change up the formula a bit. And I think it leaves room to add stuff on later. But, I think professions are probably the thing that they're hoping is really going to fill that gap, that people will be kind of energized to go participate in gathering and skill up their gathering and get some nice high-level mats, high quality mats, I should say, and convert that into cool stuff they can make for themselves or for their friends and guildies, or just, maybe put on the auction house or work some crafting orders or whatever. And I mean, I could see that being robust, right? There could be a lot of stuff to do there. It'll definitely have you outdoors because you're going to have to go out into the zones to find stuff for your recipes and everything like that. So I think it could work, and it could potentially translate into some very good character power for you and your friends and your alt stable. They've tried to add so much stuff into the end game in the last 3 expansions, and most of it felt really flat. They spent so much time building up island expeditions and war fronts and Torghast, and I mean, I think island expeditions were okay for what they were once they removed the artifact power pressure, right? Like, I thought they were fine. Whatever. I had plenty of artifact power. I was going to do anything that gave me artifact power. I didn't really mind doing some island expeditions with some friends. But people really hated them. And they hated the fact that they felt like they had to do them, otherwise they'd fall far behind on AP.
I feel like that hate derived from having the quote-unquote tier gear be locked behind neck level. The neck level thing was, I think, what really, really bothered people.
Right. So
because that's what made islands feel like something they had to do.
Right, but then in the initial implementation of islands, also getting any kind of cosmetic rewards or even the coins you got out of them, it was tuned so low.
Oh, there's that too. Yeah.
There was really nothing to do in there. Like, you were only getting AP, which you either didn't care about because you were just an AP getter, and so you just did whatever, or you were already mad before you ever stepped in the island about. Warfronts were like a cool idea, but I think it's just impossible to replicate what they were going for inside of World of Warcraft in a way that's like actually fulfilling. So that was kind of a bust. I mean, I think the reworks to Arathi Highlands and Darkshore were cool, but overall, like, that was a ton of dev resource for nothing. And I mean, Torghast is maybe the biggest swing and a miss I can remember, like, of all time. It should have been cool, but like, when you think about it for a few minutes, you're like, yeah, actually having like a roguelike mode inside of World of Warcraft will never work. And I mean, people just hated it so much. And I think it's great that they're not trying to build and stand something up like this for this expansion that's going to live and die in 2 years. I think with raid, dungeon, PvP, with professions being a bigger slice, and then whatever's going on in the outdoor zone, I think there's going to be plenty of stuff to do. We know it's going to be more alt friendly. So if you want to play more than one character, then if you really need something to do, you can do that. And I mean, like we were talking about earlier, you can more or less raid log without penalty, except you aren't going to get those fringe benefits of stuff like gold and, mats and consumables and whatnot that pay off and keep you, raid ready or what have you. I think it's fine. I think it's kind of a direction that the game needs to go in order to sort of recenter itself and reconnect with casual players and people who really do not want the experience of, okay, what time is it? It's 11 a.m. Okay, it's reset time. I have to log on to characters 1, 2, and 3 and do their daily loop so that I don't fall behind on this goal that I have for collecting this somewhat time-limited currency to collect these other things once I get enough of the currency.
Man, what a different spin. My spin was, great, it's 11 a.m. I get to log into all these characters and do this thing. Like, it was a very different
how many
spin.
people do you know that, like, legitimately feel that way? I mean, like, I like doing that. I could go back. I could take it or leave it, I guess, ultimately. I like doing it, but almost nobody I play with actually enjoys that aspect of the game at all and just wants to do the stuff they actually want to do.
Yeah, I've always liked... it's this, I get the same excitement every week for opening your vault, right? It's reset day. All these things are up. I get to do so many more things in the game. There's a reason for me to really get in and get excited and do something in the game. And I found BFA brought that for me for a lot of the time. I think towards the tail end of the expansion, obviously that dialed off, that sort of fell off for me. But certainly for the first 2 patches, I was very much like, okay, when's reset? Reset's at this time. Okay, I get to log in at reset, and I'm going to go do all of this stuff that I want to do at reset. And that was exciting for me. But I agree that I'm in the minority, and I was in the minority in BFA. I've always sort of been that minority of, I like having a reason to log into the game and do something in the game. I like having that reset kind of feel of excitement of there's more stuff up to do. When we were doing Legion stuff and there were new quests popping up every 2 weeks that we got to sort of go and do and explore and check out. Like, I like having that new thing, that thing added, that reason to log in. So yeah, it's something where if what we're looking at is a Zereth Mortis style zone, I would just want something like what we had for upgrade. I can't remember what the system was called for upgrading all of your buffs and poke and all that kind of stuff inside of Zereth Mortis. I would want a system like that for, the Dragon Isles, and I would want that system to be something that you could get upgrades in consistently through the expansion. Not something where you could just plow and finish and be totally complete or whatever it is, but something that, even if it's 10% more mount speed, or it's better, slower fatigue on your dragon riding, or like whatever it is, like that kind of stuff to me is stuff that I like to chase that isn't mandatory for outdoor zones and enjoying outdoor zones, but just helps you along the way and gives you something to sort of chase as you're logged in and doing. Most people I know sort of maxed out that Zereth Mortis system within the first 6 weeks to just be like, okay, it's done, and then never went back to Zereth Mortis again once they finished it. And it was like, oh, all right, well, what if that system took a little bit longer and felt a little bit less impactful, right? Like, is that something that's better? So I don't know. I wouldn't mind that much. Okay.
Yeah, I think just where we're at after the last, I mean, it's been a turbulent 4 years here for the game. I mean, BFA just went splat when it came out, and it was really sad because Legion was very well received, and the game was sort of like peaking again, and people were really excited for BFA, like over the moon excited for BFA, because it's adding these elements that we've been sort of waiting for, these parts of the Warcraft mythos that are missing from WoW, Kultiris and the Zandalari Empire and all this stuff. And, BFA had a huge launch, sold a lot of copies. They did a lot of promo for it. And people were coming out of the woodwork to play WoW again. And, it was 8.0, and it was a big problem. And, Shadowlands, people were excited for that too. The big cosmetic customization overhaul and all these new concepts being introduced to the game. And then they're bombarded with these systems that don't have really clear answers as to what is a good idea to do and how to do it. And, everything is so heavily time gated based on how much of this resource you can acquire. And I think it just turned people off a lot. And I think a way to get the thing is casual players make up a huge part of the audience. And a lot of people who become sort of lifestyle players start out as casual players, and you need to have stuff that's digestible to them and that they can get in and have fun and enjoy what they're doing. And I think they really missed the mark with Shadowlands, especially in terms of just the overall systems density and the amount of long-term investment that the game was kind of, saddling you with. You have to do this every week for this amount of time, or else you don't get to do all of this stuff in the game. And people just didn't care after a couple weeks. So it's I think it's better to just maybe pare it down. Let's have more just kind of, meat and potatoes World of Warcraft stuff to do for a little while and see how we feel about it and where it makes sense to go from there. But I still think even without all that stuff, there's going to be plenty of things to keep you busy at the outset of Dragonflight. And I don't think it's a cardinal sin if you don't want to play your main for 2 hours a day.
Yeah. It's just everyone has their own vision for what they want WoW to be. And I know I'm in the minority. All right. Next writing comes from Adam and WoW, who says, hope you can squeeze this in, which we are, so it's fitting. Was hoping to get on and join you for profession, since it's ideally Adamant's topic. Adamant is one of our avid profession people who actually makes many millions of gold. Yeah. Off of taking advantage of legendaries and whatnot. Usually I try to cover all professions with the characters I have most of them maxed out, I think, except Inscription, as personally I don't have much demand, which I agree, there is very little demand for Inscription. Leveled all legendaries and played the auction house quite a bit in 9.2, made solid bank. However, from what I've seen from the Dragonflight Alpha, it will take a lot of time to max out all professions and their talent trees, whereas in Shadowlands it was only a question of characters regarding legendaries and gold. So I will focus on maxing out some talent trees while depending on others to craft the other stuff I want. I really hope they balance the professions right, making the early ranks desirable while giving a reason to level up. I fear it ends up that only the best stuff will be in demand. So you skill up with trash, like rank 1 through 3 legendaries in Shadowlands, but maybe they've learned something from Shadowlands. The beginning of the expansion is always wild when it comes to professions and gold making. Mats are super rare and expensive, so gathering is really worth it, and margins on crafted gear are often high. It will be interesting to see how this turns out with work orders. I expect margins to be lower, but could be quite engaging, and I think their goal is to get crafting out of the hand of the few gold goblin people, and make it engaging to the wider player base. What would be a good, and that would be a good thing. In the long run, I'll probably max out most of the talent trees because I like checking out these boxes, checking all these boxes. Yeah, so yeah, Adam and I also hope that the desire between the low end and the high end is there when it comes to, maybe someone who does normal rating or heroic rating isn't looking to get that much more prestigious potion, or people who are doing farm aren't necessarily looking to use the more expensive potions, so they just use up the lower end stuff. I have the same fear as you do of at what point does the market just become so saturated with low end stuff that it tanks the price so low that people are only really buying the high-end stuff because it gets so saturated with high-end stuff too. I think if the difference in crafting low-end stuff to high-end stuff is substantial enough, you'll actually see people who are like, I'm more than happy to spend a gold on healing potions versus spending, this is totally relative numbers I'm giving, versus spending 12 or 15 gold on a healing potion that's high-end. When you have that kind of a difference in margin, I think you'll see a lot more people buying up low-end stuff for, even like when we were doing like Halandris prog, for example, right? Where we know we're going to wipe in the first minute or 2 minutes of a fight for the first 50 pulls, right? Use cheap stuff, right? You just use up all the cheap stuff that you can use there. Because yes, there's a 3% difference between low-end and high-end, and that 3% is going to matter on the kill. But when you're learning to do a fight and progressing on a fight, it's not going to be as important. So I think that's a good way to sort of look at it, and I'm hoping that's the direction they go with it for sure.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is one thing Adam is talking about is crafted gear, right? I feel like the market for crafted gear is going to be radically different because of crafting orders. I would imagine that I don't really see why, if you're crafting stuff, why you wouldn't just work crafting orders versus making stuff and hoping you could sell it. I mean, I guess you get the immediacy, right, as a customer of there's a thing on the auction house, I want it, I just buy it, versus placing a crafting order. But, I guess the good thing is you'll have an outlet. You don't have to guess. If you want to craft some stuff and try to make some coin, you could see what people are asking for and fulfill those orders. So I think that'll help out with this quite a bit. But yeah, I think you're definitely onto something when you say that, the goal is to get crafting out of the hands of a few and make it engaging for the wider player base. Absolutely. And WoW has always been kind of a crafting light MMORPG for most players as compared to some other games in the genre and some of its predecessors and stuff, where crafting was really more of a high-end goal. And I think that was intentional because I think that they wanted the gameplay to be more adventuring and action-oriented and stuff. And I think, the game is now in a spot, and has been for a while, where it can be that, and they can also have, crafting and professions as a concept be engaging and a part of the puzzle more so than it has been. So it is weird though, because for very established players, it's like if you've just never done this stuff at all and it never appealed to you in any way, are you going to start doing it in Dragonflight?
When it's harder to do. It's like the system is more complicated now. Yeah.
Right. It seems like a hard sell, to people who've just been averse to it. I think people who enjoy it and get into it will probably find a lot to like with it. And I think the people who have just ignored it for going on 18 years will probably just keep ignoring it, which is okay. Not every part of the game is for every player, of course. Yeah. But it'll just be interesting to see the effect that crafting orders has on some of the stuff that Adam raises here, where you're making stuff particularly because somebody is putting up the coin to buy it because they want this item. That could really shift a lot of the stuff around. And obviously region-wide auction houses are going to change things a bit too. I expect that they're going to reduce prices on small servers. I don't think small servers have enough gravitational pull to really affect the prices on big servers. Because big servers are probably so much of the overall economy that dumping a bunch of little servers in with them is all it's really gonna do in terms of prices is probably just reduce prices on smaller servers. But the market will become much more fluid, and you'll be able to move stuff. And you put something up, you put up a stack of mats, and it's actually going to sell in a reasonable amount of time, and you're not going to have to relist it 5 times to get somebody to buy it. So that'll be nice, and that'll certainly impact the materials and commodities and consumables markets. And I think crafting orders are going to have a similar huge impact on stuff like that. I mean, yeah, you might want to just take a flyer on it, right? Like, okay, I can make this really high level item. and I don't need one because I already made one for myself or I have something better. And none of my friends need one. So I'm going to make it and see if anybody will bite for this price. Like, yeah, we do that now. I mean, legendaries are the obvious Shadowlands example. But it's a thing that we've had for, many years in the game in various forms, and you'll still do that in some cases. But if your goal is just to convert your, investment in the game, your expertise in your profession into coin, then I think there's going to be much more efficient ways to do that, which is cool. Of course, my concern for myself is that if I stay on Bailgun Doomhammer, that there's not going to be enough crafting orders to keep me busy from a blacksmithing perspective, because there's not enough, customers to be like, hey, I need some stuff crafted. So a big part of it is just making sure those items are cool and desirable and fun to have and use, and that'll make people want to buy them. And then a way that they will want to buy them is via crafting orders. So fingers crossed. I mean, there's some pieces in place but once you start getting into populations and stuff, man, it can be that's where I get a little bit nervous, because I've been living in a non-functional economy for it really tailed off at the end of BFA, but then it cratered in this expansion. There's just nobody left. So, as much as I love these ideas, unless there's some like massive inflow into my server group, crafting orders might be a dead end for me pretty fast.
Oh, it's region wide, man. You'll be fine.
Is it?
Yeah, it's all region wide. Auction house, whole thing, region wide.
No, that's
all US.
No, that's for commodities and consumables.
Oh, is it literally doesn't involve crafting orders?
And crafting orders are not commodities or consumables, and it's not the auction house. I mean, I guess you could put up a crafting order for consumables, presumably. Right, you could say I want a stack of flasks or something, but yeah, no, I mean, from everything they've said and everything, like, first of all, keep in mind that crafting orders are technically a separate system from the auction house. It's auction house like, but these items are not on the tech that is the auction house. And yeah, as far as we know, any kind of finished goods or on the auction house or crafting order stuff is going to remain server locked for the foreseeable. So that could really impact the stuff for now. I mean, I'm hoping that much like cross-faction stuff coming in on an opt-in basis and a limited basis, I'm hoping that's sort of like just a pilot program for a wider version of that. I hope the same thing for the auction house and crafting orders as an extension of that. Like, start small, fine. Make sure everything works. Make sure that players engage with it the way that you expect them to. Make sure the tech is stable, and then expand it, because playing on a low pop server is really, really weird these days. In terms of like a functioning auction house economy, just having mats available to buy, being able to sell mats, being able to buy or sell finished goods, consumables. It's really weird. Yeah. Where we kind of ended up. So those are things on my radar, but at the outset, we're just going to have to cross our fingers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we hop into Adam's question for us, we actually have Ultramecha Jeff waiting for us. So I'm going to bring Jeff down in here, and I'm going to unmute Jeff. Can you hear us okay? Can you participate? Are you here, sir?
Hello, hello.
Hello, it's working just fine, and you sound great.
Yay! Yay! Frog is
Welcome back. Hi, Frog.
Hi, Frog.
Yeah, so here we are.
Welcome. I'm so glad you could make it. That's awesome.
Indeed. So your question.
Yeah, sure.
To me, yes, if we're ready. I guess since I've gone back to being a casual player, like I started out casual, rated, and now I'm sort of back to being casual again. I liked the RP aspect of professions in the past. As it was easy as a rogue to make simple leather for my leveling, and paladins could make belt buckles, and I could put a gem on my wrist. I mean, that part's interesting. So I'm hoping, things calm down a little bit. I found Shadowlands just to be difficult because of, I think, just legendaries, because you kind of hit this wall if you're not going to do legendaries, that you sort of can't just make stuff anymore. So that's sort of what I'm hoping to go for again. Just see how it comes, organically.
Yeah, I would certainly like to see the all the professions, including scribes, have something that they feel they could make on a weekly basis that is valuable for them and that is interesting for their character. And I think that is something that those professions have been lacking a lot over a long period of time. And it's certainly something I've talked about on the show a lot, of like professions after the first 3 or 4 weeks of an expansion just kind of drop off a cliff as far as their viability. If you aren't someone who makes, flasks and potions, or in this case, armor kits and gems, that's kind of like, if you aren't doing those specific things, there is really very little use for your profession. And I think that's unfortunate. And I talk about those as primary professions because the secondary ones, with obviously cooking, remains relevant through the whole expansion, with being able to make, different cauldrons, the stone soup being something that people could make. But everyone can have access to those. There's nothing particularly special about those particular professions for your class. So yeah, that'd be nice to see.
For sure. I mean, I remember, Pandaria was great for just being able to make like your PvP gear back in the day. That was always fun to do. And leather kits were great. And actually currently my shaman is mostly just enchanting, which is great because I can just re-enchant my stuff and, stuff from my friends as well. So, I mean, that's part of like just the casual organic experience and all that. So I'm just hoping it comes back to that again a little more. Jason was talking about RP earlier, and it'd be nice to sort of have that again. But we'll see what the order system does to that. Hopefully it doesn't get to be too cutthroat. I guess it depends on your server.
Yeah, it definitely will. I don't think it'll be too cutthroat on mine. Well, it might be because there'll be so few orders, posted that everybody will be fighting for scraps. But I think there's something just inherently cool about being able to power up your character or your alt or your friends' characters or whatever with stuff that you made in the game by doing stuff in the game that, skilled you up and collected your mats and did all the stuff. Like, there's just a cool element of that. And it's never really been as big of a part of WoW as it seems like they're gearing up to have it be in Dragonflight. So, I'm hoping for the best. I think, what we really need to see is just the big picture of what the items and stuff that we're making look like and what they do for us. And I think that'll answer a lot of questions, right? Just to see like, how good is this stuff really compared to what we're used to from crafted gear and from professions. And from the little bit we've seen so far, it looks really cool. So it's a part of the game that I don't want to say it's been ignored, but it's sort of it was like intentionally just this sort of afterthought or this like level up kind of stepping stone process and never really kind of a focus of your end game play. So it's weird. It's such a blank canvas for WoW, right? So it's a little bit like, well, is this really going to pay off? And I think they really want it to, and there's obviously some cool ideas in there. So I guess all we can do at the moment is wait and see.
True. I mean, it used to be just part of your identity, but now it's just, now your alts do that.
Right. Yeah. It's like this inconvenience almost, right?
Yeah. Did you end up having a specific question for us today?
I mean, I know it's early times for the alpha, and I apologize, I haven't listened to the interview yet with Morgan Day, but I was just wondering, in your experience so far with alpha, is there anything that that gives you pause that you're worried about, or is it just too soon because they may or may not clean it up?
I think the largest pause I had, which I think will take, which I think Blizzard's addressing, was about the shock to people's systems with talent trees. And I think them implementing default templates for people to choose from is a good solution to that large concern that I had initially. Because logging into the alpha and being like, okay, I want to get out there and start playing in the open world, and being like, oh, but before I do that, I have to put 60 points into this system that dramatically changes what I can and can't do on my character, is like daunting, and is something that can certainly feel like a barrier between you being able to just hop in and start enjoying the game. So they're adding in default profiles that will be something that you can choose from, as well as a system to import other people's sort of profiles for their talent trees. So if you went to your Wowhead or your Icy Veins or whatever, they would potentially have a bunch posted there that you could copy and paste, similar to like getting Hearthstone decks inside Hearthstone. You can copy the code and paste it in, and it'll fill out the tree for you. You can save that and save different profiles for your talents. So I think they're addressing that concern pretty well. The idea of having default templates came after we did our interview, so I'm glad that that got addressed, because that was certainly up there on my my list of concerns. Outside of that, I don't think there's anything that stood out to me as like this early in the process as oh no, I think they're going down the wrong path. I think they've sort of set a good foundation for the things we've experienced, and I think that's going well so far. Jason, how about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you on that one. It is a little jarring, the talent rework at first, especially for me, who like my class isn't in there yet, right? So, I mean, obviously I play a lot of different tunes, but I'm not really intimately familiar with how they work or what's supposed to be good about them. I look up an Icy Veins guide and I pick my talents and then I go, So when you're kind of presented with this degree of like, okay, what's important to take here? What does this mean? What does this do? How does this synergize? How should I build this out? And like nobody knows at all, and the stuff is all going to change a million times. The impermanence of the alpha makes it even weirder, right? Because we know that there's stuff in there that's not actually implemented. We know there's stuff in there that's broken. We know that none of this is going to ship in this state, but just the idea of like, I'm logging in a level 60 character and I have, 51 talent points and I have 2 trees and I got to build this whole thing out so my character functions. I agree with you. It's daunting. And I mean, it's part of the reason why I haven't been able to play Evoker at all, dude, because you have to it's a completely new experience, right? I don't know what any of this, I can't wrap my head around it at all. So it's very daunting. I think the idea of having like starter builds, well, I've been talking a lot about the casual player experience tonight. I think it's crucial that this expansion land for casual players. I think, obviously Blizzard is invested in the future of World of Warcraft. They just bought a game studio so that they could absorb it and have its employees work on World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is at the point where it needs to sort of become a generational game, and it needs to attract the offspring of World of Warcraft players, right? I mean, it's going to be 20 years old soon. You need to kind of replenish the base with younger players and players that like, I mean, a lot of us came from EverQuest and Anarchy Online and Star Wars Galaxies and City of Heroes. MMORPGs were the hot genre in the early 2000s, and there were certain things about the genre that you just accepted, and they were the building blocks, and you got in and played it, and WoW did it better than all of them, in my opinion. And it's really moldy now in certain perspectives, and I think part of what I've seen in the alpha is trying to shake some of that dust off and give it a fresh coat of paint and look at some stuff and go, well, what if we did it like this? Or this? Why is this still like this? And I think that's good. That needs to happen. I think it's really cool that you can buy a copy of Dragonflight, and without any other investment in the game, you could just make a Dracthyr Evoker, right? That could be your first character if that's really what you want to do. If that really speaks to you, and I think I don't know exactly how that initial intro experience is going to play out, in a live environment, but that might be a bit daunting for players. I think that the talent reworks will not be too bad for people who are accustomed to playing their mains by the time that it actually comes out, and the trees are kind of dialed in the way that Blizzard is happy with, and with all the feedback they've been taking and responding to about the process. That speaks pretty highly of how the process is going. I'm not saying everybody's going to be happy. People are going to be upset, and that's your right as a WoW player to be upset about your specs talents. But we'll have the whole pre-patch process and everything like that. There will be guides on Wowhead and Icy Veins and in class discords. And so if you really don't know what you want to do, you can just follow that. And but I think that could potentially be a big barrier to people getting in and having fun. Other than that, part of it is that the way they're doing this alpha is smart and it's interesting, and I think it helps them get really laser focused feedback on the stuff that they need to test in this phase. It's a bit jarring as a player because every week when you log in, the experience is radically different. It's not, in previous tests, it's sort of like, hey, there's a new build. The level cap went up 2 levels and you can go to this other zone now. And this feature got turned on, and it's like, okay, cool. I'll check that stuff out when I play this week. This time around, it's like, well, in this build, you can go to these zones and this stuff is available, and please test that and let us know. Thanks. See you next week.
And you went from being level 56 to level 50 or whatever it is, right? Like they bounce your level around lower and higher.
Yeah, it's hard to see the big picture right now, which maybe is fine because the scope of this whole thing seems more intimate in terms of like your connection to your character, and instead of your character's connection to these other systems. And it feels like the outdoor world is more about exploration and discovery and reawakening and all these kinds of things, which is really cool. And I feel like even from what little I played of like the outdoor gameplay, the level up, like the moment to moment is very rewarding and fun. It's just like the zones are just great. So I don't know, the stuff that I would really be concerned about would be some of these end game pitfalls these rakes that they've stepped on over and over again in the last 4 years or so, 3-4 years, with currencies and layers on top of layers of stuff that players just don't want to work their way through. And from what they talk about, it sounds like we probably don't have that stuff on the immediate horizon, but also we can't see anywhere near the breadth of the big picture at this point. So it's hard to say. But I suspect that stuff is going to be more streamlined and more player friendly. But if there's some wacky thing at endgame where you have to do some activity twice a week in order to get enough of a currency to do another thing that you want to do, then I don't know. We're not seeing that yet. I don't think it's going to be in 10.0. But then again, in other test phases of earlier expansions, we didn't see those rakes, and we only they only got stepped on once the game shipped. So you never know. But I think the good thing is I've never seen them be this responsive to like alpha test feedback, especially like in terms of class design and stuff. You're seeing blue posts like on the regular with class design devs saying, you know what, you're right. That implementation is bad and we don't like it and we're going to change it. Or they're saying, we don't know where we're going with that yet, but thanks for letting us know. Or they're saying, you know what, that is like that for these reasons that we feel pretty good about, but you're going to have the choice to go one way or the other with it. That's a big shift from what we saw last test cycle, where it was more like, we understand that you're unhappy about these things, but we think the design is good, so you're just going to have to play it and find out. I don't want armchair devs making World of Warcraft for me. I want Team 2 to make it, but there's obviously been stuff in the recent past that they should have flexed on and they didn't. And it doesn't feel like we're in that space anymore, which is encouraging. I'm not saying everybody's going to have everything that they want and that everybody's going to have a party when their final talent builds get locked in or whatever, but it's a better place to be than where we have been.
No, agreed. And then, and going to your last comment, they have to make the game that they want to play, ultimately. So I'm glad. I mean, I'm glad that they consider what we're doing to the game, as it's an alpha. But so yeah, the armchair thing I agree to. But it's also I'm also really glad to hear that the Dracthyr are playable day one, just after Legion and BFA, and just having like these ghost characters not appear for some time is really good to hear.
Yeah, and there's not even any requirements that we've seen like with previous hero classes, right? If all you want to do is make a Dracthyr Evoker, you can just do that with purchase. Which, yeah, I think that's the way. Like when they first brought in Death Knights, it kind of made sense, especially considering how good Death Knights were when they came out. Like it kind of made sense that they wanted you to have some other kind of investment in the game in order to unlock them, and that was it was a minor barrier for most people who had been playing, Burning Crusade or whatever. But for new players, it was sort of this, badge of accomplishment to unlock your Death Knight, right? It's not 2008 anymore.
The game was only 5 years old at the time.
Right. I mean, it's not 2008 anymore. The industry has moved on. This is not what players expect for their money and their time. So I think what they're saying about how unlocking evokers is going to work is the way to go. You unlock it by buying the expansion and then go make one and have fun.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, was there something else you wanted to ask, or are you all set?
No, that was it. Just wanted to pop in and say hi. Thank you guys. And
nice to hear your voices.
And we'll see you soon.
Always good to hear from you too as well. Thank you very much.
Appreciate the support, and yeah, great talking to you as always.
Yeah.
Cheers.
All right. We are going to pop back into Adam and Wow's question, which was, what do you guys think of the Season 4 info that recently got released? Basically, Season 4 is coming out on Tuesday, and Blizz was like, hey, we should probably put together some sort of like release to the player base as to how everything's going to work, because they haven't really talked about it very much. So we got this huge blog. We got several big blog posts about Season 4. One was actually specifically about class balance changes, which was very nice to see, because I don't know if anyone was really expecting a lot of class balance to take place, at least not initially. Maybe after we'd seen, some rating for them to actually see how stuff was going to work with people doing 300 and something high level gear on their characters, and what it was going to feel like on some of these bosses that are, that obviously we didn't have tier sets for, etc. But we got a bunch of class tuning, which I think is great. I loved seeing that. As far as the other information went, I felt a bit with the timeline of this release and with the information we got with things like legendaries not being bumped up an item level, that it made Season 4 seem less like a, hey, we'd planned to do this for several months. We had been putting, ducks in a row to make sure that this was going to be a very successful thing. And so we are releasing this in a completed form, kind of. It felt less like that to me. It felt a little bit more thrown together in how they chose to release things. That doesn't mean that it's not put together. It just means that because we had this very large Dragonflight press push, there was very little press or time for doing stuff for Season 4 as far as releases went. And so we got this last minute release that answered a lot of questions that people had, which I think was great. I know Skarzard had initially gone on Twitter and basically just said, if you have questions about Season 4, I'm doing a really big blog post them here. And I know I'd submitted some inside Creator Discord, and a bunch of people had submitted them there, and so it's a pretty big post. But it felt weird that they hadn't gotten this information to us sooner. They hadn't gotten the information to us early enough that we could then give feedback on it, like things like the legendaries not being bumped up. I think I didn't want to see another craftable thing, be upgraded where you have to craft 5 of them and then it bounces up on item level and you have to take one and go downstairs to the basement of the Torghast and get the piece upgraded to it. But having something that's like a consumable that you can get off of a vendor that for, Cosmic Flux that you buy, and you just right click on your legendary item and it bumps it up by 20 or 30 item levels, I think would have been great, because it's going to feel really weird to have gear where the itemization on all of your other gear except for your legendary slots is higher than your legendary slots. So much so that I think there will be some classes that start looking at, should I stop using my Unity? Because my Unity power isn't super, super, super strong. And so is it more worthwhile to wear something that has 30 item levels on my legendary inside of that thing's place? Because it has so much more primary stat and secondary stats on it than my legendary does. And that is going to feel really weird to have people taking off their second legendary. So I foresee issues with that. And those are the type of things that would have come up very quickly had we gotten this information sooner. So that's why I feel like this isn't going to be as polished a product as we're used to getting at the beginning of a season launch. I think it's great that they're choosing to do this. I feel like if they had have needed 2 more weeks to sort of get it to that state, if they released the blog post now and then they had a week or 2 weeks to get feedback and then start making some changes to sort of, tune some of those things out and maybe putting an item to upgrade legendaries, that kind of thing, I would have preferred to see that happen. And had us live inside Season 3 for 2 additional weeks or 3 additional weeks, whatever it was, before hopping into Season 4. Because I feel like as is, Season 4 is going to be fun. It's new. It's exciting. There's a lot going on with it. But I feel like people are going to have some pretty big questions as to why some things are the way they are. And I think the answer to it is we didn't have time to make it as finished as we would have wanted to, and to get the feedback we would have wanted to on it. I think that's unfortunate. And from playing on PTR and from seeing stuff on PTR, there's a lot that was on PTR. Sorry, there's a lot of things that weren't on PTR that are happening in Season 4. So it doesn't even feel like we got a PTR build for Season 4 that was actually accurate to a certain degree as to what was going to be happening. And that was also a big question mark for me. That was very weird. So yeah, I think I was mixed with this info. It was great to get it was wonderful to get the info. I loved getting all this information. I just wish that we had an opportunity to respond to the decisions being made in Season 4 to potentially make the season a better experience for everyone.
Yeah, I don't really think that the stuff that is coming in Season 4 would have been up for debate. I mean, I'm sure that they were aware of the legendary thing. It was a choice that was made, right? Like, so we'll see. Maybe it becomes a problem because low item level legendaries compared to other gear are not desirable. If that becomes the case, then maybe they can adjust that via hotfix or whatever. It seems like a deliberate choice because otherwise they would have done something about it. We knew for a long time that there was no, upgrade item or upgrade path for legendary items on PTR at least in Season 4. So, I don't know. I think that the patch notes look pretty good. I mean, we're going to talk about this in depth on Tuesday, or I'm sure.
Yeah,
the patch notes look good. I'm happy about the Prot Warrior tuning. Huge ignore pain buff incoming. They're adjusting some trinkets and stuff so that if you have like a really high level dungeon trinket that is inaccessible in Season 4, that you're probably going to want to use a new trinket. And that is somewhat unfortunate, but I think it's the correct thing to do. You want people to seek out new items when there's a new season of content.
Well, I would also emphasize it removes the feels bad moment of, well, now I have to go out and get this trinket again so that I can upgrade it to a higher item.
Right. Yeah. And I've seen some people I know like lamenting the fact that whatever trinket that they're using is like getting changed and that they can't go get another one. And it's like, why? I didn't really have a good time getting my 3rd blood spattered scale of Shadowlands, to be honest with you. Like, actually it was my 4th because I got 2 in Season 1.
Right.
Because if you remember, it was like halfway through Season 1, the Valor upgrades came in. Yeah. I had an old one that wasn't upgradable. So I had to get my key dungeon drop 4 times. I would not be happy about going back for a 5th. I want to try some different stuff, man. I want a little different priority, a little different play style. So yeah, I think that's a good thing and kind of inevitable in terms of those item adjustments. Yeah, they're trying out some cool stuff. They're couching it as like experimental, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this stuff become sort of standard for a little while. I think having raid vendors that sell a limited amount of very key items is great.
Crucial. Oh yeah, huge.
Like considering that we don't have bonus rolls anymore, and the Great Vault is kind of what it is, right? Like it's better than getting one random item that the game picks for you, but the pool of items is gigantic, and the likelihood that you're going to get any one particular thing that you want is very unlikely. It's just not. I don't know how the math works out, but I can tell you from a feels perspective, it doesn't feel as good as bonus rolling on the particular boss that drops the particular item that you want. So with all that stuff in mind, I think having those vendors is a really good idea, and I also am excited for the possibilities of the raid upgrade items, right? So I get this item at normal item level from a normal drop, or I get it from a vendor, and then as I kill heroic bosses, then I can make it a heroic quality item, and then as I kill mythic bosses, I can make it a mythic quality item. This is a great feature, and this is the kind of stuff that I hope sticks around. So like I want to be encouraged to continue to play the game and to try harder difficulties and try new bosses, and not have to rely on a roll of the dice once a week to get particular piece, So I think the stuff they've released, it sounds good to me. My main concerns with season 4. I mean, first of all, the dungeon pool I think is potentially going to be really not fun unless the tuning is very player favored. Just revisiting some of those dungeons is going to be weird, and keystoning up some dungeons that never have been before is going to be extremely weird. So hopefully they feel good. But the timing of all of this is really my biggest concern. I feel like 5 months for season 3 just wasn't enough. And I know a lot of people are pretty checked out or kind of done at this point, but it wasn't enough time. It's not as much time as we expect for this, especially with, feats of strength going away. Like, yes, the mounts are staying, but it's, there's something psychologically different there about, having the ahead of the curve or whatever, having the cutting edge versus, just having a mount, I think. People expect to do that, or that's sort of their goal. And that was a hard goal to meet this tier. They missed the mark with raid tuning and with raid difficulty and complexity. So season 3 is not long enough by at least a month. And season 4 is going to be almost as long as season 3, probably.
It seems like
you figure if season 4 is as long as it could possibly be, it will be about 4 months long, right? Like let's say Dragonflight ships in 2022 and it comes out at the very end of the year, and pre-patch is a month before. Then season 4 is about 4 months long, which is all of 1 month less than season 3, right?
Yeah.
And if Dragonflight ships any earlier than that, then it's, you obviously bump that all up. But so we don't have a lot of time for season 4, which is why they're already talking about how they are walking back the 30 dinar plan, because, I think they see the writing on the wall that people aren't going to have time to kill this many fated bosses in this time frame.
Yeah, it's also why they did at a certain point, all bosses are fated all of the time thing.
Right, and that was like new information this week or last week, whenever they came out, right? And that was, at least it was new to me, and I pay a lot of attention to this stuff, and I had never heard that before. So, I think they're kind of assessing like, we might have a situation where we need players to get 30 dinar in 1 week. Otherwise, what are we doing here? I get it. Like these reality shift. I mean, we kind of speculated after the pre-sales went up and everything that, it's been like 8 weeks since the expansion announcement. Maybe they had some kind of milestone that they had to hit by then to know whether or not they're going to ship. And, maybe that was the question of like, okay, how long are we going to need season 4 to last for? And maybe that is kind of I'm speculating here, but maybe that's a reason why some of this stuff gets shifted around. So, I like a lot of stuff they're trialing out in season 4 and how they're handling some of the other stuff. 278 conduits for cosmic flux and everything like that. Account-wide Sandworn relics, like just reducing friction everywhere across the board. Very cool. The timing is just it's just rough. I think a lot of people are struggling with that I play with. You know, it's summertime, people have vacations and other stuff they want to do away from the game. And I mean, I want to go get some faded bosses and get some cool gear and stuff, but you know, I get it. It's just the reality of a game that never stops, right? But there's a weird convergence of stuff, and season 3 feels like it just got cut a bit too short. Even though I myself am pretty much done with it. Like, there's really nothing else I want to do in season 3. I feel like, considering how dense it was and how difficult it was, it didn't get enough time to breathe. And season 4 is just going to be like a straight up whirlwind, because it's probably going to be over before we get comfortable with it.
Yeah, well, I think it certainly is going to be over before we get comfortable with it. And the one thing they hadn't addressed at all in any of that information is what their objective was for the tuning of season 4 raids with Faded.
Yeah.
And that's the big question
huge,
that I've been asking is, what was is their objective that a team that currently can clear mythic content, a mythic raid, can walk into a Faded raid and clear that raid that week? Is that an expectation that they have, right? Or is it something where, because of the eye level jump, those teams should expect to get in there and have to actually gear up their characters in Faded gear before being able to defeat Denathrius or be able to defeat, right? Like, how is this tuned exactly, right? Because, and
they have sort of alluded to, like, I think they've dropped some hints that make it sound like they're expecting to be gentle to get back through here and re-clear. But the thing is, they can't come out and say that, really. Sure. And they can't really state that as like a goal officially at the outset, because if anything doesn't go according to plan, then that's like a firestorm. So I will say the Faded buffs look pretty powerful. So as long as it's not too much of a headache to acquire them during the fight, like, yeah, I mean, I have the exact same concerns you do. I think they've been trying to subtly reassure us, but it's hard for them to have like official messaging about that without, potentially creating a giant problem for themselves.
Well, it's interesting because in a situation with Faded raids, if a team is learning how to, because they weren't around for the beginning of the expansion, do Stone Legion Generals, for example, and they then don't see them for 3 weeks, that sucks. That really hurts a team's ability to be able to progress on that boss. So things need to be tuned so that within the, I'm willing to bet the average heroic raid team raids probably, 6 hours a week, 8 hours a week kind of thing. That those teams can actually feel like they are making progress even though they aren't seeing content for those 3 weeks. And that's crucially important. So I want to be sure that there isn't a situation where it feels like, hey, you know what? You don't have Faded raid gear, which means that you should probably go and run, as a Mythic Raider, you should probably go and clear Heroic first to try and get the gear pieces that you need to progress inside Mythic. And in Mythic, expect to get maybe half of the bosses this week in the time that you have. And then when you come back in the next time this is up, you can work on trying to get more bosses. Like that concerns me if that's the balancing they're going for. I am hoping, and this is something that so many people have been reassuring me of, like, I'm sure that it's going to be face roll. And you're going to be able to go in and just smash through Mythic, and it's a loot pinata, and every boss is kind of a loot pinata as long as you're doing mechanics properly. That's all that matters. And my big response to that has always been, I guess Sludge Fist will let us know, because that is going to be the boss. Yeah. That is the DPS tuning check next week. We're going to see Castle Nathria as Faded. People are going to get back in there. They're going to be able to get to Sludge Fist, I'm sure, in that first chunk of time. And if that is a boss that just gets pounded and falls over without even getting close to Enrage, then I think they tuned everything well enough that, yes, we don't need to have 30 more item levels. We don't need to be 308 or whatever it is item level to be able to actually feel like we can clear through this content successfully, regularly. And so if this content isn't tuned around, if Mythic Faded content isn't tuned around being like 295 or 298 item level, I think they missed the mark, personally. I think they dramatically missed the mark. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, we have like no time here, right? Yeah. Like, we know we have at least at the very least, we have until mid-September before every raid is Faded, right? what they released a schedule that was like 2 times through the rotation, so 6 weeks starting on August 2nd. And they said at some point in the future. So the earliest it would be September 13th, I think it was, that like all of the raids, like Fated just gets turned on. But that's not what they said, right? That's just the earliest it could possibly be if you extrapolate what they said in the post.
Yeah.
So really, like, this is not a lot of time to reprog and relearn fights and adjust to the challenges presented by Fated affixes and the scaled up bosses and everything like that. And meanwhile, you also have the pressure to get your dinar every week because you can only get it from Fated bosses. So you only have whatever raid is Fated that week. And you better kill every single boss in that raid that week if you want to stay on pace to get your items in time to actually enjoy them, right? Which means you are now stepping back from your target difficulty if it's too hard, which may or may not be like enjoyable for you. It may not really be part of your guild schedule, so you may be trying to find pugs. You may be doing LFR or something just to knock those kills out. And man, that's a real suboptimal situation to be in, right? So I think they have a responsibility to us if they want this to be fun and experimental and make it be a thing that, you know, players want to engage with and check out. Like they have to correct the mistakes of season 3. You cannot. Guilds have no time to get pulls in. Like you're gonna do Nathria next week, right?
Yep.
And if you get hung up on Sludgefist or SLG or Denathrius, then you don't even get to do it again until August 23rd.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Now maybe it comes out of the gate like that because of numbers and things not going according to plan, and so maybe the first week is a little rocky or something. But they got to make big adjustments quick out of the gate, because the bottom line is this stuff needs to be falling over. There's a reason why they didn't do a cutting edge. They didn't do a Hall of Fame or something, or like some kind of faded ahead of the curve or something for this tier. And I hope that a part of that reason is because stuff is waiting for you to kill it. You know, that's really, I feel like that's what we deserve as players after this expansion, right? Like, this is the victory lap that we should have for hanging in there and keeping the team together and powering up the whole time and getting the kills. Is we should have 3 months to just pound this stuff into the dirt, get some awesome high-powered gear, get the exact pieces we want, and power them up as high as we can get them. Like, yes, that would be amazing. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. And I think when you look at the overall structure of how Season 4 is laid out as we know it right now, if it's not like that, then it will fail on many important levels, regardless of anything that does work, right? If the bosses aren't killable out the gate, then they screwed that up. That they need to be dying. Your team, if you were AOTC in Nathria and you're caught up on Season 3 item level, you should kill Fated Denathrius next week. And if you were Cutting Edge, you should kill Mythic Denathrius next week. And if you don't, to me, that's the game's fault. And that sounds like maybe a weird thing to say or whatever, but like, the Fated season should not be about placing these challenging hurdles in front of players for them to navigate and solve the puzzle. It should be about get the band back together, kill the bad guys, get the cool loot. So we'll know a lot more in a couple days.
Yeah. All right. Last response comes in from Night Raven 2015, who says, I don't have a tremendous amount of time in the game, and I like having some time to myself outside of the game, so I typically only level to max skill and try to make my own flasks and potions and be as self-sufficient as possible for raid and other activities. I don't have much desire to be a pro auction house dealer or anything like that in Dragonflight, but who knows what will happen. I definitely enjoy that they are revitalizing professions. And his question for us is, how difficult do you think profession items that are on par with high-end raid and Mythic Plus gear should be to craft, and how difficult should reagents be to get? I came to WoW in BFA, but I was always amazed that in vanilla, many crafted pieces like the Lionheart Helm We're best in slot for most, if not all of vanilla, and getting back to that has the potential to rejuvenate the gearing system. Thanks for the show. It's a joy to listen while delivering mail. Well, you are one of our many mail carriers who listen to the show, so thank you so much for helping out our community by doing that important service, and hope you said hi and made friends in our Discord with all the other ones that exist that are chatting away in there. It was very cool today, having a bunch of them chat, so very cool. All right, answering your question. As far as the how difficult profession items and high-end gear should get, should be to craft, I think it's not unreasonable to have daily cooldowns for things like they have with transmutes that are required to be able to do this. And maybe there's 8 of them that are required, which means for one particular profession type, like let's say I wanted to make the Lionheart helm. Let's say that's what we're making, right? Let's say you need a mining person who can smelt ore, and that's on a daily cooldown, and you need 8 of those pieces of ore. You need an alchemist person who can make a certain potion that's going to be, added to this to sort of give it power. That requires 8. It's on a 1-day cooldown, and you need a blacksmith who is going to be actually crafting and making this piece of gear, and they have a reagent. Maybe it's, bolts or something that they have to make, and they require a cooldown. Like, that wouldn't be unreasonable to me. So it takes 8 days to make one of these worth of cooldowns. Cooldowns that you can be doing all of the time. You don't have to be like only doing them when you're starting this process. I think that is not unreasonable. That gives you more than a week worth of commitment to be able to make one piece of gear that is at this level for mythic rating or whatever it is, that requires, on top of all of the other, ingredients that you would require to make this, at least that 8 days of daily cooldown. And now, when they specifically talked about these pieces of gear, they also talked about like requiring a certain amount of luck to be able to get the highest end, best crafted piece you possibly could, and that you could reduce that luck factor by using the special reagents and the higher quality reagents to be able to do these things. So it wouldn't bother me if you required 3 professions to make one piece of, like 3 professions contributing to make one piece of mythic raid gear at that level, at that item level. And also requiring some of the other high crafted reagents to sort of pitch in to make it happen. I don't think it should be something where I log into the game and I have, 2 million gold sitting in my bank because I had it from last expansion. I haven't played the game for 3 months into this expansion. And I go on the auction house and I go, yeah, 300K, I want this mythic piece of raid gear, crafted for me. And people just put it together. I think that is too low of a bar. Often when we see BOE items go for mythic raid, they often go for hundreds upon hundreds of thousands, if not millions of gold for those pieces of gear. And so I think something comparable would be what you're kind of aiming for as far as effort into the game of, 550K to 1.5 mil, depending on the piece of gear and how high it rolled for, stats and bonuses and whatnot, wouldn't be outrageous for where that market should sit for those items. And I think whatever the effort is required to do that should be comparable. So yeah, I think that's kind of where my mind sits for that thing. When it comes to just the one other thing here with the special reagents, how difficult should they be to get? I'd love to see reagents come back in that you can get from raids. Even LFR. Throw them in LFR as well. Why not? Having to enter a raid and mine a node or gather something off of a dead boss or whatever it is that's used inside crafting, that's cool to me. I like that. I like the idea that it encourages people to do group-based combat. I dislike if they put it inside dungeons, specifically because bosses don't drop loot in Mythic Plus other than the last boss. So unless the reagent drops off the last boss and always comes out of that chest, I don't want it put inside dungeons because I don't want to have to go and run normal or heroic dungeons to get a piece of crafting reagent for making a mythic rating level piece of gear. I think that is just feels cumbersome. So if they're going to put anything inside dungeons, it needs to be out of the Mythic Plus chest. And that to me would be fine if they chose to do that. But when it comes to raids, I think it's always fine to throw it in there, especially if it's accessible on LFR difficulty, because yeah, people can log in once a week and do an LFR wing and get the piece of crafting reagent they need to work their way towards doing this mythic level crafting. I think that's great. Yeah,
I definitely think there needs to be a time investment involved. I would be okay with maybe like weekly cooldowns or something, right? So maybe you could make, I don't know, 3 or 4 items a week instead of make 1 a day. Because if you miss a day of logging in or whatever, that's kind of
I like
punishing it.
Yeah.
But you should. Yeah, I don't mind like a small time gate, because if you're trying to get a specific item from a raid drop, right? The odds that you get it in any one particular week are pretty low. You might get lucky, and that's the benefit of participating in, group content and overcoming the challenge, whether it's a raid boss or, a high level dungeon or rated PvP or something. I think, you can't build those type of challenges into the profession system and make it fun. Cause I guess what would be the challenge hurdle? Like you just fail and you end up with a pile of mats that doesn't turn into an item. Like that wouldn't feel very good. Right. So, I think the time involved sort of can become that challenge barrier, because it's about having that consistency. It's in a way, it sort of mirrors like if you were an actual blacksmith, the more you blacksmith and the longer you do it for and the more consistently you do it, the better you get at it, right? So, I mean, not like the game should mirror having an actual profession, but just in terms of the role play element of it, right? So there should be like the time commitment in the game for a profession generated item, it should be kind of commensurate with what you're aiming for. So if you're aiming for like a mythic raid item, it should be hefty. You shouldn't be able to crank one out every other day or like even once a week, I don't think. I like your suggestion that you need to cooperate with other professions and get mats from other professions, because that's sort of in the spirit of all other high level end game activities, right? Like you're not doing any of that stuff by yourself. Yeah. And there's an economy. You have gold. You can buy stuff from people. You can put in crafting orders for stuff. So, you can either cooperate directly with people or do it through these markets. I think that's fine. I think there should be a reasonably high, if you want to make stuff that's on par with the best items that drop from PvE content, then yeah, you should have to put time in. It should cost you a fair amount of mats that you have to go collect, from some part of the world or from doing some type of activity. If it's Outdoor World, fine. If it's a particular quest chain you have to do on a weekly basis or something to get a mat that then you use to convert an item into very high quality, and then you combine it with a bunch of other mats. And I think, you need to make the system deep on that level in order to not just make it the correct thing to do, right? That's sort of I think the problem that they need to avoid. The potential problem is like, well, all I really need to do is just easily craft these 5 items that are on par with Mythic raid gear or like, Mythic plus Great Vault gear. And then I just don't worry about those slots ever. Like I have my set items. I have 4 of those and I have 5 pieces of crafted gear, and I don't care about anything that drops. Right? Like I'm geared out via crafting and via the creation catalyst, whatever they call the replacement for the catalyst. I have everything I want and need, and anything else is just a small bonus. And I did it by going to, a UI panel and spending gold. Like we don't want that, right? But I think there's probably some middle ground there between items that become useless 3 weeks after the expansion comes out and what I just described.
Yeah.
So that's what they need to find. But I definitely, and people who maybe are not really interested in multiplayer endgame, but have been sort of eager to see these profession changes come in and to see a path for them to kind of just solo their way towards very powerful gear. They may not like to hear what I think needs to happen in this regard, but yeah, it should take you a while and it should take a lot of mats because other people are overcoming logistical hurdles to field the team and then overcoming the difficulty hurdles of the game in order to get the kills and then fighting the RNG system to hope that all of that effort and time investment spits the item out they want.
Yeah.
Whereas from a profession standpoint, you know what item it is. You're going to make it exactly the way you want it. So your hurdles need to be in place. They're just going to be different than the ones that come from, combat gameplay.
Yeah. And I would think people who love professions and crafting things in professions would actually enjoy the system being more barrier and more gated, because it makes the market for those items much more attractive and have more longevity, as opposed to just flooding the market with them very quickly.
If you really invest in it, then it's a way to distinguish yourself as a player from people who don't. So that, you know, there's something to that as well.
Yeah. All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up episode 533 of The Starting Zone. This has been a great patron call-in episode. Thank you so much to all of our patrons who participated. If you're looking for show notes for this episode, which has a list of the questions that we answered, you can find that over at thestartingzone@gmail.com. Sorry, it's thestartingzone.com. If you want to email us your questions, you can do that at thestartingzone@gmail.com. That's where that came from. And obviously, you can reach out to us on Twitter and over in the Starting Zone Discord as well, which is thestartingzone.com/Discord to hop in there. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. Always talking WoW and whatever else I'm getting into. And you can find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Sundays are Raid and Keystone Dungeon streams. And of course, they're going to get real wacky this Tuesday, assuming servers are up for Season 4 roll. We'll be in there, 7:30, pretty early in the evening to see what Fated Heroic Nathria is like. And Alpha streams Monday nights, probably 7:30-ish. I don't have like a firm schedule on that because I'm doing it by myself, of course. But yeah, so we'll be checking out, the weekly Alpha build and kind of poking around and seeing what's going on in there. So stop on by the Twitch channel as well. Cool.
Yeah, we're already having conversations in my raid team about who's holding the lantern for Shriekwing and what's going on with that for all the mythic stuff that we have to do.
I probably have some people that never did Shriekwing, like in Heroic and up, and we'll see. It's going to be fun.
Yeah,
hopefully.
We're also trying to compile a list of all the weak auras that we had back then that some people deleted. I still have some of them, but there's a lot of people who purged out their libraries of Castle Nathria and have to sort of find a way to get all that information again.
You got to just reach out to somebody who played in Nathria then quit. Like, listen, I'll buy you a month of game time. Just log in and let me copy your weak auras.
Yeah. All right. But if you folks are trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and job's done. Hi everyone, I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Celian, Infark, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, Nick, and Shorel. Thank you! This sounder is for you.